The rise of a family of immortal cultivators. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 51: The Power of Inheritance. Furthermore, during this period, the remaining two children had successfully absorbed spiritual energy into their bodies. Wang Lin had one disciple, and with the original one, they had two disciples. Wang Zimin had three, Wang Zi had Wang Ya, and Wang Da had Wang Xiazhen. Now, Kenya was the only one left in the courtyard below. As Wang Zimin and Wang Da brought the last child up the mountain, Kenya feigned composure, though deep down, he was likely filled with disappointment. Can you sense spiritual energy now? Wang Da asked Wang Zimin, seeing him leave, to talk to him alone. Kenya shook his head. Perhaps I'm just too old. I still can't sense spiritual energy. Don't be discouraged. They've been up the mountain longer than you. You've only been here about a month, while they've already been cultivating for over 2 months, Wang Da consoled him. I know that. I've asked them, and many of them have sensed spiritual energy after only 2 weeks. Kenya paused. I really don't want to go back to herding cattle and working the fields, but I think this is my destiny. The path of cultivation requires extraordinary tenacity and perseverance. If you keep thinking this way, even if you sense spiritual energy, it will be useless. If you really want to go back, I'll send you down the mountain tomorrow, and you'll spend your life herding cattle and farming. Wang Da saw that he was still dejected and scolded him. He flew up on his sword, but then felt that his words were too harsh and continued. In today's world, if you go back, you'll literally be farming for the rest of your life. We don't need you here anymore. Giving up simply out of pity would be a shame. I'll come find you tomorrow at this time. If you still feel the same way, I'll send you down the mountain. Seeing Wang Da leave, Kenya sat in the courtyard for a long moment. After all, he was 14 years old, and he had his own thoughts. He'd been breathing in and out every day, over and over again, without making any progress. It was natural for him to want to give up. But Wang Da's words today had finally dawned on him. If he went back to farming, with his family's capital, he'd be stuck there forever. Now, here, he didn't have to make any effort, and there was even a chance he could change his fate. That night, Kenya pondered a great deal. He didn't practice or sleep. Sometimes, a change of heart is more important than diligent practice. He was still mortal, after all. The next morning, he felt incredibly sleepy, but his mind still hadn't figured things out. His thoughts kept spinning, seemingly reaching a dead end, and he didn't feel right. Before he knew it, he was asleep, lost in his own thoughts. Unaware, everyone within the mountain gate had gained a modicum of enlightenment, and he benefited from this, entering a state of trance. Normally, he wasn't a cultivator, unable to achieve trance, but the continuous breathing gave him a different state of mind. An unknown amount of time passed, and by the time darkness fell, Wang Da flew down from the mountain. He didn't want Qin Yi to leave. After all, the family was so few now, and a new disciple wouldn't be accepted until next year. One more person meant more support, more contribution. As Wang Da approached, he saw a massive vortex of spiritual energy in the courtyard, sweeping all the plants and furnishings into the air. Wind, endless wind, gathered above the courtyard, a vortex that alternately descended and ascended. In the center of the vortex lay Qin Yi, sitting cross-legged, his hands forming an unknown hand seal, something like a spell, something like a ritual. Unaware of the reason, Wang Da hurriedly called down from the mountain to Wang Zimin and Wang Zi. Upon seeing this, the two were also immediately puzzled, but it was clear they couldn't disturb him at this point. They all noticed that Qin Yi seemed to be in a state of trance. This state of enlightenment is extremely difficult for cultivators to achieve, something they can only desire but not demand. But Qin Yi wasn't a cultivator, so how could he have achieved such a state? Wang Da pondered this. Ever since Wang Xiazhen's spiritual roots began to mutate some time ago, he had suspected it was the influence of the 3 passive forces. Perhaps Qin Yi's current state of trance was also related to his enlightenment. For a long time, the wind didn't subside, So Wang Zimin and Wang Zi returned to the mountain to look after the other children, leaving Wang Da alone to watch. A day and a night passed, and Qin Yi still hadn't emerged, nor had the wind subsided. Wang Ziazhen, having encountered difficulties in his cultivation, came down to consult Wang Da. Seeing Qin Yi like this, he was also surprised, staring blankly, as if he were both yearning and apprehensive. Wang Da, observing this, did not disturb him. Could it be that Qin Yi's spiritual roots were also undergoing a mutation? Then he thought of the fact that Qin Yi had 3 spiritual roots: water, wood, and fire. With the blessing of his understanding, the possibility of mutation was extremely high. However, Wang Ziazhen looked at it for a long time before he came to his senses. When Wang Da asked him, he only said that he could not help but yearn for it, but he could not explain the specifics. After Wang Da explained his doubts, he went back to the mountain. Another day and night passed, but Wang Zi seemed to have thought of something and flew down anxiously. "Chief, I know." "What did you know?" Wang Da asked hurriedly. "This is a kind of inherited power." Wang Zi said. "What is the inherited power?" Wang Da asked. "Something engraved in the bones, inherited in the bloodline, and can never be erased." Wang Zi said. "What do you mean? Explain it." Wang Da still didn't understand what she was talking about. The power of inheritance is the power of a cultivator's flesh and blood, fortified by spiritual energy after reaching a certain realm. Therefore, exceptional cultivators are like the bloodline power of a demonic beast. A dragon gives birth to a dragon, a phoenix gives birth to a phoenix, a dragon is born a dragon. Similarly, creatures like Jiao and anacondas, once they cultivate into dragons, their offspring will also be dragons. This is the power of their bloodline. For example, among the disciples of our Wang family, apart from ordinary people, if 2 cultivators form a Dao couple, there's a 90% chance that their children will have spiritual roots. This is the simplest form of inheritance, which is why there are families of cultivators. The power of inheritance I'm referring to is something that cultivators only acquire when they reach a sufficient level of cultivation. For example, at our level, our descendants naturally don't inherit anything we cultivate, they simply possess spiritual roots. However, for these powerful cultivators, once they reach a certain realm, their bodies are already transformed into a certain state. So they pass on this power to their descendants, forever etched in their bones. I heard about inheritance before in the Bull family, so I know about it, Wang Zi said. So, he's the descendant of a powerful cultivator? Wang Da asked. Wang Zi nodded. More likely, he's the descendant of a powerful cultivation family. To inherit the legacy, one needs to cultivate to an extraordinary level. What level? Wang Da asked. I don't know either. Nascent soul or fusion might not be enough. Above that, I don't know what level it is, Wang Zi said. Chapter 52 Qin's father with 4 spiritual roots. Wang Da's mind raced. He'd assumed he was just an ordinary mortal, but he'd unexpectedly recruited someone with inherited power. This Qin family, surely, was far more powerful than a small clan like the Wang family could compare. This was the difference between a clan and a sect. A sect wouldn't hesitate to recruit a person, no matter what their inheritance, and potentially even lead them to greatness. Wang Da recalled the first time he'd met Qin Yi. He'd said his father had fled here, married a widow, and fathered him. Thinking about his 3-element spiritual roots, it seemed rare to find one in the entire eastern region, not just the Wang, Liu, Zhao, and Sun families. He should have guessed this long ago, but he simply hadn't known about the inherited power. Clan leader, what should we do now? We don't know his origins. If he angers a larger force, it's probably more than our Wang family can handle, Wang Zi asked. Don't rush. Let's wait until he absorbs this inherited power. Wang Da rubbed his brow, a hint of anxiety rising. By the way, how long will this thing last? I don't know. I haven't seen it, Wang Zi said. Wang Da nodded and told Wang Zi to watch while he prepared to descend the mountain. Since Qin Yi still possessed the power of inheritance, he would have to inquire thoroughly before deciding what to do next. If, as Wang Zi had said, he had unknowingly angered a powerful faction, the Wang family's current capital would be no match for him. In Titao village, Wang Da found Qin Yi's father with familiarity, a dark, muscular middle-aged man who looked nothing like the scion of a prominent immortal cultivation family. The man was in the fields during the autumn harvest. Before he could react, Wang Da injected a stream of spiritual energy into his danshan. Despite his lack of cultivation, Wang De nodded and produced a small dowsing stone, using his spiritual energy to direct the man's hands to focus on the stone. The 4 spiritual roots, water, wood, fire, and earth, were all mixed. As expected, Wang De's expression instantly darkened. The man, frightened and bewildered by Wang De's actions, immediately knelt down in response. Master, what brings you here? What happened to my son back in the mountains? Wang De observed carefully. Father Qin's expression didn't betray a single hint of emotion. If he was acting, his acting was incredible. He didn't look like what he'd imagined. Could he truly be unaware of the power of inheritance? Wang De pondered for a moment before asking. Is your last name Qin? The man nodded. It's been Qin for generations, unchanging. Why did you come to our Wang family's territory? Wang De continued. It's a long story. We were once wealthy, and we weren't even in Yizhao. But by the time of my father's generation, the state government had confiscated our property, and we fell into poverty. The family scattered, unable to return. I fled with them to Yizhao, but encountered bandits. I had intended to reach central Yizhao, but I was unable to reach it. With no money left, I ended up here. I later married, had a son, and settled down here, the man replied. A wealthy family, from the mortal realm? Aren't you from a family of immortal cultivators? Wang De asked. The man shook his head. I don't know anything about that. I'm just a bastard from a side branch of the family, so I don't know much about our clan. I just know some of our family members are officials and businessmen, but no immortal cultivators. No immortal cultivators? Wang De asked again. The man nodded. Our place is different from Yizhao. There's a difference between immortals and mortals. Forget about cultivating immortals. I didn't even know about immortal masters when I was a child. I only learned about them after arriving in Yizhao. Wang De looked thoughtful. He didn't seem to be lying, so it seemed he truly didn't know. But for a side branch descendant, a bastard son, to possess 4 spiritual roots, even though they were all inferior, was still incredibly strange. Wang De flew away again. After testing Qin Yi's father's spiritual roots, Wang De was convinced that Qin Yi was indeed the son of a prominent immortal cultivator family, and he pondered whether he should keep him. If they stay, things might develop in the future and might even be related to some old events. After thinking a lot but still not coming up with a conclusion, Wang De decided to go back and discuss it with everyone. After all, his knowledge of the entire world of cultivation is not as rich as Wang Zimin and the others, especially Wang Zi, who had seen some of the world in the bull family before, which was much better than them who were frogs in the well. This is also one of the advantages of the family. When something happens, there is always room for discussion, rather than just one person's opinion. Wang Zimin, Wang Lin, and Wang Zi were stopped by Wang De. Qin Yi was still in the yard, and the vortex had not dissipated yet, but no one was looking after him. After Wang Zi explained the situation, Wang Zimin and Wang Lin also understood the general origin of this child named Qin Yi. This is the situation. Everyone express your opinions and share your thoughts. Wang De said. My reasoning is simple. I didn't agree with him going up the mountain back then. Firstly, he's too old, and he's not a descendant of the Wang family. I think he should be expelled. Now he's still receiving the power of inheritance. Once he officially enters the sect, we can give him a few pills, teach him the techniques, and teach him a few basic skills. Then, we can let him leave the mountain gate and become a free cultivator. It won't be considered harmful to him. He might even remember our kindness. If he's truly a descendant of a major immortal cultivation family, they can resolve their own grievances, Wang Zimin said. The 3 of them lowered their heads in silence for a long time. Then, Wang Zi spoke. I think so, too. Our Wang family is already weak, and its development is even worse than some of the free cultivator groups in Fanqiu Mountain. If he really causes any unnecessary trouble, it will destroy the foundation of the Wang family and make us completely mortal. Wang De already understood and nodded. In fact, he still wanted to keep Qin Yi, but he also considered what they said. Although he possessed the power of the system, it was inevitable that his family would flourish. However, recruiting a member of a large family without any apparent reason could lead to some trouble. If he wasn't careful, it was possible that, as they had said, the Wang family would be plunged into disaster. Wang De looked at Wang Lin, motioning for him to express his thoughts. Of the 3, only Wang Lin remained silent. If Wang Lin shared their views, Wang De had no other options but to agree with them and expel Qin Yi from the mountain gate. This was not something he could consider alone. He didn't know the strength of those large families, but he could imagine that the three of them had much more experience than Wang De and naturally considered more comprehensively than he did, at least regarding the external environment. Chapter 53 The Question of Qin Yi's Stay or Departure. Wang Lin lowered his head for a long moment before raising his head and speaking. As the saying goes, wealth and honor are sought amidst danger. Even with our family's current development, the eastern region remains unresolved. Qin Yi's father has lived in Titao village for decades, yet no one has come seeking revenge. Even if we keep Qin Yi, unless he makes a name for himself, the general public wouldn't know about him. What I'm trying to say is that since Qin Yi possesses the power of inheritance, his spiritual roots are clearly not as weak as they appear. Consider the realm of cultivators capable of inheriting the power of inheritance. How could their descendants possess low-grade spiritual roots? Even Patriarch Wang De, with his mid-grade spiritual roots, inherited them from the previous patriarch. For example, my parents both have low-grade spiritual roots, so I also have low-grade spiritual roots. So, at least he's not low-grade spiritual roots. I'm afraid we'll only see his true spiritual roots after he receives the inheritance. A descendant of such a prominent family is bound to achieve considerable accomplishments through cultivation. While the clan's mountain gate has undergone some changes, we don't know what the future holds. Can they truly, as the patriarch claims, dominate the eastern region and Yizhao in a few years? Having someone like this with the power of inheritance is at least a guarantee for the family, at least in the current situation. If we educate him well, he'll surely feel a sense of belonging to the Wang family. Just as the patriarch said, staying as a son-in-law, he'll surely be grateful to the Wang family and become a pillar of our family. If the family truly becomes as powerful as the patriarch has promised, then wouldn't this person be a significant asset? Wang Lin spoke eloquently, and Wang De nodded, aligning himself with him, though Wang De hadn't yet expressed his opinion. Since Wang Lin wanted to keep Qin Yi, Wang De's mind was firm. However, Wang Zimin spoke up. What you say is true, but the family can't afford any more accidents. Now that we're the only ones left, if we cause trouble, we might lose even our foundation, and Congentropi Mountain will be destroyed. The two men discussed endlessly, but never argued. Wang De could see that they were both concerned for the family. Wang Zi remained silent, her timid nature clearly exposed. Though there were only 4 of them, and though she held the highest cultivation, her ingrained character wouldn't change. By the end, Wang Zimin and Wang Lin had reached a consensus, leaving the decision to clan leader Wang De. Wang De had wanted to hear the perspectives. After all, he was young, having only been in this world for a little over 2 months, and naturally didn't know as much as they did. But now that the matter fell to him, he had to make the decision, and he could only come to a decision. Why don't we let him make his own decision? If he stays, we'll do as Wang Lin says. If he wants to leave, we'll do as Brother Zimin says. How is that? The 3 of them nodded in agreement, and Wang Zimin and Wang Lin stopped arguing. Another day and night passed, and Qin Yi remained unconscious in the courtyard. However, when Wang De came to see him, he had spiritual energy within him, truly astonishing the power of this inherited power. 3 spiritual energies coexisting. This isn't a power only found in large clans, Wang Zi exclaimed. And there's no conflict at all. They're mutually reinforcing, absorbing spiritual energy together. The vortex above seems to be even stronger. Wang Lin was also present. Wang De nodded. They were all waiting for him to regain consciousness and make his own decision. Wang Zimin, who had originally disapproved, hadn't come down, and continued to practice with a group up there. The 3 of them watched for a while, fearing that this inherited power wouldn't end anytime soon. They immediately lost interest in watching and returned to the mountain, only coming down daily to see if it had ended. Fortunately, Qin Yi was already a cultivator in the key condensation stage, no longer possessing a mortal body, so his body remained normal, unchanged. The young men in the mountains were diligently practicing, sparring every night to see who was stronger. Wang Ye had already mastered the basic techniques, truly swiftly. Wang Zimin estimated that these basic techniques would take at least 6 months to learn, but Wang Ye was clearly exceptional, having mastered them all in less than a month, though her proficiency was still a little off. Now, she had begun to focus on cultivating her skills. As for the others, one reason was that they were not very diligent, and the other was that they were only interested in practicing. They had not mastered some difficult techniques or techniques that they were not interested in, and could only practice them under the pressure of their master. Wang did practice as usual every day. In the process of teaching Wang Xiaozhen, he also gained some insights and had a deeper understanding of the techniques. As for his cultivation, Wang De also felt that there were signs of a breakthrough, but it would take some time. The 5th level of key training was more laborious and time-consuming than the 4th level. Master, how do you see my sword-controlling skills? Wang Xiaozhen excitedly rushed straight to Wang De's room. Wang De smiled and followed him out. Most people did not dare to enter Wang De's room. Only Wang Xiaozhen dared to barge in like this. The only one left was Wang Ye, but she was disdainful. She always believed that although Wang De was the patriarch, his cultivation was not high and he was too young to be of important use. You're becoming more and more proficient, but you can't just practice the sword-controlling technique every day. You have to practice other techniques as well, and don't get lazy during your daily training, Wang De instructed. Yes. Wang Xiaozhen imitated a bow and flew down on his sword. But I think this sword-controlling technique is so cool. The other techniques are too difficult. If I fly back to the village like this, everyone will definitely kneel down to greet me, Wang Xiaozhen said. It's not that the other techniques are too difficult, but that you haven't put your heart into it. If you put your heart into it, the same will apply to the other techniques, Wang De said. Wang Xiaozhen smiled and said no more. How is your understanding of the fire technique going? No one taught you this fire technique. It all depends on your own understanding, Wang De asked. When asked this, Wang Xiaozhen lowered his head. I still haven't mastered that fireball technique. Fireball is the simplest and most fundamental fire-based combat technique. You've spent all this time and haven't even mastered it? Wang De asked seriously. I couldn't quite understand the book, and I had no one to guide me. I went down the mountain to ask the teacher and learned a little. Now this is all I can do. Wang Xiaozhen formed a spell with his hands, slowly and unpracticed. After a long while, he finally formed a spell, and a small flame was formed. Wang De ignored him and returned to his room to practice. Chapter 54, No Hesitation. Wang De knew the 2 teachers at the foot of the mountain. He would occasionally go down there himself. After all, the classics contained many words he didn't fully understand. But for the 2 teachers, understanding was much easier, as they naturally had a strong ability to interpret text. Kingentropy Mountain was fully supported by Kingentropy County. The 2 teachers had passed the imperial examinations, but instead of becoming officials, they were content to teach at the foot of Kingentropy Mountain. This fireball technique infuriated and amused Wang De. You can even call it a fireball technique? You're using it to fight someone? I'll practice diligently. No one teaches me this fire technique, so I'll just have to learn it slowly, Wang Xiaozhen said. Wang De didn't blame him anymore. Without anyone to teach me, who could he blame? He simply sighed that his family had no one to teach them, unable to educate future generations. He offered a few more words of advice and prepared to return. Master, can I ask for leave to go home? Wang Xiaozhen asked. Is there something going on at home? If not, stay on the mountain and practice, Wang De said. It's nothing, but I haven't been back for a long time. I miss my parents and my 2 sisters, Wang Xiaozhen said. A long time? You've only been up the mountain for a little over 2 months, Wang De scolded. Wang Xiaozhen gave a dry laugh and fell silent. He silently soared on his sword and went to practice nearby. Another day passed in a flash, and Wang Zi emerged from the mountain. Chief, go down and see. What happened? Wang De asked. Qin Yi. Wang De hurriedly followed him down, only to find that Qin Yi's vortex had already destroyed the courtyard and the house. A wave of heartache washed over him. If it were just a house and courtyard, made of ordinary wooden planks, it wouldn't be a big deal. The problem was that he had spent a lot of contribution points upgrading the courtyard and house, and 50 contribution points were gone just like that. He had hoped the children would quickly sense the spiritual energy and have it enter their bodies sooner. Now that the children had successfully entered their bodies and were back up the mountain, they were fine. The house was destroyed, a sight comparable to Wang Xiaozhen's. Wang De withdrew his grief and looked at Qin Yi, only to discover that his spiritual energy had already reached the 2nd level of cultivation. The 3 spiritual energies merged, but distinctly, unlike Wang Xiaozhen's, where they merged and transformed into a white aura. This inherited power was truly miraculous. Wang De couldn't help but sigh in wonder, wondering what level of cultivation his ancestors possessed. Most crucially, with this inherited power, even if a descendant were reduced to mortal status, if they could one day attain enlightenment, they could restore the family's former glory. A faint gust of wind passed by, and Wang and Wang Zi waited for a long moment before Qin Yi slowly opened his eyes. The swirling wind above them began to dissipate. "What's wrong with me?" Qin Yi asked, clearly still bewildered, unsure of what had happened. Wang and Wang Zi walked in. "You demolished my yard and house, did you know that?" Wang quipped. "Eh?" Qin Yi saw only a few wooden planks scattered around the nearby yard and house, feeling a bit bewildered. "Okay, try putting your hand up there first." Wang pulled out a small testing stone and held it out to him. Qin Yi placed his hand on it, and Wang Lin, and Wang Zi felt a sense of disappointment. They had expected a brilliant light to illuminate the entire mountain gate, visible even to Wang Zimin, Wang Lin, and the children above, revealing something like 3 types of top-grade spiritual roots. However, Wang and Wang Zi glanced at each other as the stone displayed the test. "Miscellaneous water, wood, and fire?" Wang muttered. "Is there something wrong? Aren't my spiritual roots just miscellaneous water, wood, and fire?" Qin Yi asked, puzzled. "Yes, there's nothing wrong," Wang asked. "Could there be a problem with this test? Or perhaps his talent is too high for the stone to detect?" Wang Lin asked, puzzled. "That shouldn't be the case. The last time I tested Wang Xinghe, it even detected top-grade spiritual roots," Wang said. "What if it's an immortal spiritual root? Or perhaps there's something else above that?" Wang Lin said. "I don't know. Qin Yi's inheritance shouldn't be that powerful, right?" Wang was speechless. "I'm just guessing. Maybe this inheritance has something special about it," Wang Lin said. "Inheritance? What does that mean?" Qin Yi asked from the side. The few of them looked at each other, and Wang stepped forward and explained the whole story to him. Qin Yi listened attentively, his face a little stunned. He wasn't just an ordinary mortal, he was actually the heir of a powerful family? "Can I go back and ask my father?" Qin Yi asked. "I've already gone there for you. Your father probably doesn't know anything," Wang said. "Now it's up to you to choose." "The 4 of us haven't reached a conclusion through discussion," Wang Zimin said. "Choose what?" Qin Yi asked. Wang Zimin told Qin Yi what the 4 of them had discussed. "Whether to stay or go is entirely up to you. Since we've already initiated you in, we'll still provide the basics, and we won't let you take risks outside." Qin Yi didn't think, simply looking at Wang. "I don't want to leave Congentropy. I'm just wondering, am I really not useless anymore?" "Probably not, but as for the future, we don't know, and we don't know anything about your family either. You should be mentally prepared," Wang said. Qin Yi was in a state of confusion, so Wang helped him up and brought him up the mountain. Although he was now at the 2nd level of key training, he had been in a state of meditation for so many days, and his body was inevitably a little weak. On the mountain, Wang Lin told Wang Zimin about Qin Yi's choice, which made Wang Zimin look a little grim. So, without further ado, he just asked, "You really don't want to leave Congentropy Mountain?" Wang Zimin said, looking into his eyes, as if he didn't want to keep him. "Of course I don't want to leave. Regardless of my inheritance, it was clan leader Wang who introduced me to the sect, and if you hadn't, I'd probably still be farming down the mountain. I'll definitely consider the Wang family my own," Qin Yi said sincerely. "That's not what I meant. It's just that you..." Wang Lin stopped Wang Zimin before he could finish. Wang stepped forward. "Okay, you'll stay in Congentropy Mountain to cultivate. As the clan leader, I'll personally accept you as my disciple. However, we don't understand your inheritance, so you'll have to explore your cultivation on your own." Qin Yi nodded solemnly and followed the 4 up the mountain. Several of the houses on the mountain were newly built. Wang Yi slept with another little girl, and there were 2 more. Qin Yi, Wang Xiazhen, and another little boy shared the other 2. They slept through the night, and the next morning, Qin Yi and Wang Xiazhen waited for Wang to finish his training and emerge. Wang, however, remained silent, considering what kind of cultivation technique Qin Yi wanted to practice. The coexistence of 3 types of spiritual energy within his body was something he had never experienced before. A common practitioner of the 3 types could learn all 3 techniques simultaneously, though it would be time-consuming and laborious. However, he had inherited the power of inheritance after all, and he wondered if anything would change. The Wang family currently had limited resources and no other techniques, so this was the only option. He would cultivate first, and as for other techniques, they would naturally acquire them later. Techniques could be modified, but it was more complicated. Wang De stepped out, and Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen greeted him. Wang De led them to the open space nearby. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Deceiving Wang Zimin. Qin Yi, after all, wasn't a child like Wang Xiaozhen, so Wang De explained the situation directly to him. First, the issue of inheritance, and second, the cultivation method. Qin Yi naturally understood, so Wang De first taught him the water-based cultivation method, allowing him to mobilize his water-based spiritual energy. After a few attempts, whether due to inheritance or his own understanding, Qin Yi quickly memorized the method and began practicing. Wang De provided guidance, but since he wasn't a practitioner of the three-based cultivation methods himself, he didn't know how to mobilize any of the three spiritual energy within his body. He could only rely on his own experience and slowly learn. The initial training is the most complex. After all, from immortal to cultivator, many of the problems encountered in cultivation are new, so they are naturally more complicated. Thus, Wang De began training with Qin Yi. Just practicing the basics of the three-based cultivation methods simultaneously took 7 or 8 days. After Qin Yi mastered the cultivation method, he moved on to studying the techniques of water, wood, and fire. Wang De could only teach water-based techniques. As for fire-based techniques, Wang Xiaozhen had made some progress over the past 7 or 8 days, at least with his fireball technique, which he could teach his junior fellow disciple, Qin Yi. Then there was wood-based techniques. Since no one in the family practiced them, Wang De could only give them the manuals and let them explore on their own. Teaching them had delayed Wang De's own cultivation considerably, and in the past 7 or 8 days, he hadn't been able to break through to the 6th level of key training. For the sake of the system and the family, he had to sacrifice his time temporarily. If he only cared about himself, even with high cultivation, even a mid-grade spiritual route wouldn't achieve much. Wang De's focus remained on the system, and he also felt a sense of belonging to the family. Perhaps influenced by Wang Zimin, he almost completely abandoned his time to care for the children and attend to various family matters. Qin Yi's cultivation was slowly getting back on track, but Wang De could see that it was clearly taking him longer than others, even though he had already reached the 2nd level of key training due to the power of his inheritance. Wang Xiaozhen was similarly slow, but he was younger and couldn't remember certain things even after repeated explanations. Over the past 7 or 8 days, Wang De has been considering the next building to upgrade. The Spirit Spring and the Spirit Stone Condenser have both reached level 10, providing decent results, but they haven't completely blown Wang De's mind. Therefore, Wang De isn't planning to upgrade any other buildings. Firstly, important buildings like the large 5-element Spirit Gathering Array require 500 contribution points per level, which is too expensive. Secondly, Wang De estimates that the other buildings won't be much different from the Spirit Spring and the Spirit Stone Condenser. While there will be some actual benefits, they won't be very noticeable. Compared to these two buildings, upgrading the house is incredibly cost-effective. At level 10, 10 contribution points can increase cultivation speed by 3 or 4 times, a truly incredible value. Meanwhile, spending 1,000 contribution points to upgrade the Spirit Stone Condenser only slightly doubles Spirit Stone output, making it a poor value. Furthermore, what's most important to cultivator? Cultivation. Isn't the purpose of Spirit Stones also cultivation? The same goes for the Spirit Spring, and even more so for the others. Nothing beats a direct increase in cultivation speed. So Wang De decided to save his contributions and see what would happen to this transformed house. Wang Xiaozhen and Qin Yi were back on track, and Wang De announced a period of seclusion to break through to the 6th level of key training. He told them to consult Wang Lin or Wang Zi if they had any questions. The first few levels of key training were relatively easy for Wang De, with his mid-grade spiritual roots. Besides his spiritual roots, he also had the 3 passive abilities of the Mountain Gate and his level 49 house, making his progress naturally rapid compared to that of ordinary cultivators. However, reaching the 5th level of key training became increasingly difficult. For ordinary cultivators, each level after that was incredibly challenging. Some with less talent, lacking resources like elixirs and spirit stones, often struggled for decades without a breakthrough. However, Wang was clearly different. In just a short period of time, he had already reached a point on the verge of a breakthrough. He had all the elixirs, of course, but to achieve a breakthrough, he needed to clear his mind and achieve an optimal state of cultivation. Wang took out the pieces of Ming's Xiang that fairies Hu Iao had given him and lit one. While luxurious, it seemed quite useful to Wang, who was in seclusion. After a moment, he regained his composure and cleared his mind. And so began his retreat. Outside, Kenya and Wang Xiaozhen, seeing their master Wang in seclusion, planned to return home to visit their family. Unlike the other children, they both wanted to go back. One wanted to show off. After all, Wang Xiaozhen had been frail, and playing with other children his age, he was inevitably bullied by the other children his age. The children in the village were also precocious, and since they didn't have to study all day, they played together. As for Qin Yi, he wanted to go home and ask his father about this inherited power. He had so many questions. Although Wang had already visited his father, he still wanted to ask him in person to see if he knew anything. Wang was in seclusion, so naturally, he had to consult Wang Zimin about this matter. Wang Zimin, noting Wang's seclusion, didn't agree, but simply said, "After the clan leader comes out of retreat, let him take you back." The two naturally did not want Wang to take them down the mountain. First, there were restrictions everywhere, and second, they all had things to do. They did not want to follow a master behind them and be unable to act. Wang Xiaozhen just said that Wang had agreed a long time ago, deceiving Wang Zimin. "My master said that he would be in retreat during this period, so he could not teach us, so he agreed to let us go down the mountain to visit relatives." Wang was in retreat, and Wang Zimin could not ask Wang. He was confused. Their cultivation was not high, and they had only learned half of the magic. They were afraid that if they met a casual cultivator at the first level of key training, they would not be their match. If the two of them wanted to go down the mountain, it would naturally be safest to send someone to follow them. But now there were only 3 people left, and they were all tied up. Fortunately, their families all lived near Congentropi Mountain, with the Liu family being the closest. As for the other immortal cultivation families, they were still far away and should be safe. Thinking about Qin Yi's inheritance and needing to return to consult his family, Wang Zimin could not resist and allowed them to leave the mountain. However, they had to travel together and not return to their own families. They agreed to visit one family first, then the other. After they agreed, Wang Zimin took 2 fine iron swords and several healing elixirs to give them as a precaution. These fine iron swords were commonplace, but possessed a certain degree of lethality and were imbued with spiritual energy, making them considered the more formal swords of cultivators. The two took them and, after a brief application of spiritual energy, sensed a difference from the wooden swords they practiced with. With a flick of their sword-controlling technique, they soared into the air. Both of them came from villages near Congentropi County. One was at the first and second levels of key training. Although their flying speed wasn't particularly fast, they reached Wang Xiaozhen's village in just over 10 minutes. Wang Xiaozhen was so excited that he couldn't express it in words. He had long wanted to show his friends how cool his sword-wielding skills were, and see if they dared to bully him again. Chapter 56 Immortal Master Wang Xiaozhen. Qin Yi followed behind. He was much older and more mature. Although he disdained Wang Xiaozhen's idea, he didn't say much. Outside the village, the autumn harvest had long since finished, and only a few people were walking around. Seeing the 2 figures above, they hurried to spread the news and headed back to the village. Then, 2 figures flew across the fields. Those people, thinking they were heading somewhere else, simply looked up. "Why don't we just go straight to the village?" Qin Yi saw Wang Xiaozhen turn a corner, aiming for the village entrance. "No, let's go to the village entrance first," Wang Xiaozhen said, and flew down on his sword. Flying to the village entrance, before landing, Qin Yi saw a group of children, some big and some small, the youngest no more than 5 or 6 years old, forming a battle formation at the entrance. A tall child seemed to be commanding, and the younger ones followed, their destination unclear. "Look, there's the Immortal Master," one of the children shouted, and the children all looked up. Then, 2 flying swords flew past and landed. Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen were dressed in Taoist robes, their attire elegant and their faces immaculate. The group of boys didn't recognize them for a moment and quickly knelt in obeisance, muttering words like Master and Sir. Wang Xiaozhen, Beaming, his heart already overflowing with joy, leaped forward in a small stride. "Second fool, do you admit your guilt?" The tall boy in the lead looked up, a look of astonishment on his face. "Master, forgive me, Master, forgive me, I don't know what I've done." Wang Xiaozhen was already grinning from ear to ear, his smug expression leaving the kneeling children below bewildered. A thin boy among the group took a closer look. Though his clothes were sharp, his face seemed familiar. Wasn't this the village's third son? I heard he'd gone to the county to cultivate immortality. "You're Xiao Sanzi." The boy stood up, standing in front of the two idiots, and asked cautiously. The two idiots in front and the others behind him took a closer look. This was indeed Xiao Sanzi from their village, though now he looked a bit unrecognizable. It had only been a few months since Wang Xiaozhen entered the mountains. The two idiots, convinced they had lost face, actually knelt before the three idiots. They quickly stood up and shouted, "Xiao Sanzi, how dare you tease me?" With that, they rushed forward, resuming their usual bullying. Wang Xiaozhen had almost finished laughing by this point, and he feigned seriousness again, forming a hand seal. Qin saw him casting the spell and wanted to stop him, but seeing it was only a simple water control technique, he simply watched from the sidelines. Before the two idiots could reach Wang Xiaozhen, a column of water erupted from mid-air, crashing directly into his face. In an instant, the two idiots' face was distorted by the water, splashing all over him, leaving a trace of pain on his face. "What? Now that I'm an immortal master, you still dare to hit me?" Wang Xiaozhen's face was filled with anger, unlike usual. The boys behind him, seeing this scene, fled in all directions, shouting as they ran. "Xiao Sanzi is back. Xiao Sanzi is bullying. Xiao Sanzi has mastered magic. Wang Xiaozhen killed someone. Xiao Sanzi used magic to kill someone." Ursha had already collapsed to the ground, his former prestige gone, and he could only await Wang Xiaozhen's decision. Wang Xiaozhen ignored him, flying up on his sword. A mist of water trapped several of the fleeing children, holding them in place. "Junior brother Qin Yi, help me bring all those people here." Wang Xiaozhen, feeling increasingly powerful, actually ordered Qin Yi beside him. Qin Yi glared at him and ignored him. Wang Xiaozhen had no choice but to run over, undo the mist, and force the children back. Now, the children who had been fleeing for their lives stopped running and sat on the hilltop to watch the show. "Xiao Sanzi has come back for revenge. It's a good thing we didn't bully him before. Haha, there's something interesting to watch. I remember Ruzi kicked him before." The group of children, brought back by Wang Xiaozhen, all kowtowed. "Xiao Sanzi, please spare us. We were also bullied by that idiot. Otherwise, we wouldn't dare to hit you." Wang Xiaozhen looked over one by one. Qin Yi held him aside and whispered, "Don't go too far. They're still young. I'm still young too. So they can bully me, but I can't bully them?" Wang Xiaozhen retorted. He looked at a little boy. "You, who hit me? Get up." The boy stood up timidly, and Wang Xiaozhen kicked him. Fortunately, the kick was not too strong. With a key training level of physique, if he had used all his strength, a kick like that would probably have caused trouble. The boy fell to the ground and burst into tears. Wang Xiaozhen looked at the second boy and kicked him again. This boy was obviously older, probably around 9 or 10 years old. After the kick, he immediately stood up and ran to the side. "You've gone even further. You slapped me last year." Wang Xiaozhen's face flushed with anger upon seeing the boy before him. He slapped the boy across the face, and before Qin Yi could stop him, he had already struck him. The boy was small to begin with, and although his face was dirty, his skin was obviously thin. Wang Xiaozhen's full-strength slap left several handprints, and the corners of his mouth were clearly cracked and bleeding. Qin Yi was already holding Wang Xiaozhen's hand. "How dare you use all your strength? If anything happens, I'll see how Master will punish you when we get back." Wang Xiaozhen's anger subsided, and he felt a little regretful. However, he had come back for revenge in the first place. The other children who hadn't been hit were so frightened by this that they wet their pants. The second fool at the front wasn't frightened at this point, but knew he was bound to bleed, so he stood up and shouted, "I'll fight you." As the leader of the village boys, he naturally had a fierce temper. Though young, he always had a tendency to bully others. How could he tolerate such a situation? Wang Xiaozhen and Qin Yi, only at the first and second levels of key training, had little combat experience. They were still arguing when the second fool rushed over with lightning speed, punching Wang Xiaozhen in the back. Wang Xiaozhen's spiritual energy flowed through him, and the punch was powerful. Qin Yi instinctively let go of his hand. Wang Xiaozhen simply took 3 steps back, turned his head, and looked at the second fool, his face filled with a ferocious look. "I'm an immortal master, and you still dare to hit me?" He instinctively drew his sword, shouted "Ah!" and rushed forward. Qin Yi reacted quickly. Wang Xiaozhen held a fine iron sword, now enhanced by his spiritual power. If he struck directly, he would surely lop off Ursha's head. So he quickly drew his sword and blocked the blow. Ursha stared at the 2 gleaming swords overhead. Sweat already beading on his forehead. "Are you crazy?" Qin Yi shouted. Wang Xiaozhen had already gone berserk. "Don't worry, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him." Seeing this, Qin Yi could only unleash a water mist technique to restrain Wang Xiaozhen. Chapter 57 Wang Xiaozhen's 2 sisters. Wang Xiaozhen was physically limited, and knew he was no match for Qin Yi, yet he kept shouting. "You're my junior apprentice. How dare you rebel against your superiors?" "Ah!" Qin Yi couldn't help but laugh. "You may be my senior apprentice, but rebelling against your superiors isn't something you can do." Wang Xiaozhen struggled to break free, but his temper was momentarily deflated before he came to his senses. "Qin Yi, if you let me go, I'll beat him up, but I won't kill him." Qin Yi knew Wang Xiaozhen was already furious, and at a young age, he'd act recklessly. Naturally, he didn't let him go. Instead, he said, "How about I beat him up for you, and we'll wipe out our past grudges?" "No, I want to do it myself." "Let me go," Wang Xiaozhen shouted. Seeing he couldn't persuade him, Qin Yi quickly shouted for the boys nearby to run. The boys reacted and quickly ran towards the village. "Don't run. If you do, I'll remember you and repay you double in the future. He can stop me today, but he can't stop me forever." Wang Xiaozhen kept shouting. None of the boys listened to him, they all ran away. Qin Yi finally let Wang Xiaozhen go. Seeing them all run away, Wang Xiaozhen slumped to the ground. "You're already a cultivator, still learning to read and write at the foot of the mountain. Why are you still so irritable? How will you cultivate in the future? If the masters knew, what do you think would happen?" Qin Yi said. "I didn't really want to kill him." Wang Xiaozhen realized that he had been too impulsive earlier and now calmed down. "It's just that you don't understand the feeling of being bullied by them." "Of course I don't understand. You know, my last name is Qin. I used to be bullied by many people in the village, but now that I'm older, I just treat those things as a joke," Qin Yi said. Wang Xiaozhen glanced at Qin Yi. Though he was a little confused, he could imagine how someone from an outsider could survive in the Wang family village. Still unconvinced, Wang Xiaozhen lifted his robe, exposing his thigh. "Look at this scar. It was last year when that idiot hit him with a stone. He's so vindictive, he's no different than anyone else. My parents went to talk to him, but they're also village scoundrels. They haven't even offered an apology," Wang Xiaozhen said. This. Qin Yi saw the size of the cut on his leg, and it was truly shocking to a child like him. "Did he do it?" Wang Xiaozhen nodded. "That idiot's family are used to bullying others in the village. It's not just the children, it's the adults too. It's common for his parents to take advantage of them. Is there really such a person?" Qin Yi, despite his age and lack of experience, was somewhat surprised. Although he was from a different family in the village, he got along fairly well with the Wang family. He'd only been bullied as a child, but the adults weren't such scoundrels. Wang Xiaozhen was about to say more when he saw a group of adults from the village running out, naturally including his parents. The boy Wang Xiaozhen had slapped was also there, held in his parents' arms. Seeing that both were dressed in Taoist robes, they dared not speak and could only hold their breath. Unsure whether to pay homage, they saw Qin Yi nearby and all knelt, shouting "Master Immortal." Wang Xiaozhen ignored them and went to look for his parents. Qin Yi told them to get up and disperse. Everyone dispersed, afraid to say anything about the people Wang Xiaozhen had kicked, and no one dared to confront him. This was the Immortal Master, to challenge him was courting death. Qin Yi followed the 3 into the village and arrived at Wang Xiaozhen's home. The villages at the foot of Congentropi Mountain were all very similar. Qin Yi, who also lived there, naturally didn't pay much attention. He simply watched Wang Xiaozhen, trying to prevent him from doing anything out of the ordinary. Xiaozhen's parents arrived home and began bustling about, lighting the fire, cooking, and asking questions. Wang Xiaozhen had no choice but to answer each question and introduce Qin Yi, saying he was his junior apprentice. Qin Yi then greeted them politely, but Xiaozhen's parents, lacking any formality, simply smiled and agreed. Qin Yi then sat down again. The three of them chatted until they went back to the back room to cook. Qin Yi was left alone in the front room when a voice rang out from outside. "Is Xiaozhen back?" It was a soft, female voice. Qin Yi guessed it must be one of the two sisters Wang Xiaozhen kept talking about. Then someone walked in. Qin Yi looked over and saw a slender figure dressed in a light blue coarse cloth. She carried a basket, a beaming smile on her face, and muttered something. "Xiao Sanzi." Wang Xiaozhen was chatting quietly with his parents in the back room, so his voice went unheard. Qin Yi wanted to speak, but instead of looking up, he saw the woman's face. Though a little pale, it was incredibly beautiful. Qin Yi was only 14 years old, experienced in life but also knowledgeable. He knew he had never seen a woman as beautiful as her, either in his own village or at the Kongentropy County office. Even Master Wang Zi in the mountains was considered 1 in 1,000 in terms of appearance, and as a cultivator, he lived in luxury and took care of himself. But compared to the woman before him, Qin Yi felt he surpassed Master Wang Zi by many times, and that was certainly what he thought. For a moment, he was stunned. The woman had entered the room with a smile, but instead of seeing her parents or Xiao Sanzi, she saw only a young man in Taoist robes, holding a long sword. She was at a loss as to what to do. Seeing the young man staring at him again, he couldn't help but bow his head and nod. Hearing the voice, he was about to head to the back room. This made Qin Yi feel that the woman before him was even more beautiful, and his young heart began to flutter. However, by then, the woman had already trotted off to the back room. Qin Yi realized he had lost his composure, and then he remembered what the teacher at the foot of the mountain had said: "Don't look at anything indecent. Don't look at anything indecent." Moreover, this person was his senior brother's sister, so he shouldn't have done that. He shook his head, pretending to be serious, and sat down to calm himself down. But no matter how hard he tried, he found that he couldn't calm down. His heart had long since been out of control. Not long after, another female voice came from outside. "Xiao Sanzi, you're finally back." Once again, the words came before the person arrived. Qin Yi immediately calmed himself. This time, he couldn't do it again, or he would lose face as a master at Wang Xiaozhen's house. But this time, the person who entered was a big, broad-shouldered, tall, and burly man, a true portly man. Her clothes were tightly cinched, and her face was thick with flesh. If Qin Yi hadn't heard her voice was a woman, he would have doubted she was a man. Qin Yi had seen many fat people, like Master Wang Lin, who was also fat, but compared to this sister, they were nothing. Xiao San's family wasn't rich, so how could someone with such a figure? Even in Qin Yi's own village, he had never seen one. She was stunned again. The woman, like the previous one, entered the room with a smile on her face. Seeing a young man sitting in the room, she couldn't help but feel a little strange, but from his attire, she could guess that he must be the immortal master of the family's Middle Mountain sect, and she didn't dare to be rude. But the shock on this man's face also made her feel a little angry. She had been ridiculed for her figure countless times, and how could even the immortal master be so vulgar? Chapter 58: A Young Heart. At that moment, Wang Xiaozhen and the woman from before emerged from the back room. The portly woman, upon seeing Xiaozhen, immediately ran forward and scooped him up. All three of them beamed. Xiaozhen was an only child, and his two sisters were naturally close, especially seeing him return. However, the stark contrast between the two sisters struck Qin Yi as odd. Despite the intrigue, he didn't want to ask any further questions, simply watching the family's joyful encounter. After a while of playful banter and questioning, Wang Xiaozhen spotted Qin Yi nearby and quickly pulled his two sisters over to introduce them. "This is my junior brother, Qin Yi," Wang Xiaozhen introduced proudly. He was proud to have a junior brother who was at the second level of key training and older than him. Qin Yi didn't say anything, simply standing up. He didn't see anything wrong with being Wang Xiaozhen's junior brother, having joined later than him. "These two are the two sisters I often refer to," Wang Xiaozhen continued. As Qin Yi looked up, his eyes caught sight of that stunning face, and he instinctively lowered his gaze, his cheeks already flushing. Wang Xiaozhen naturally didn't notice, she was just a child, after all. This immortal master must be 13 or 14 years old. How could he be your junior apprentice, The stunning sister asked curiously. Kinyu felt the voice was truly heavenly, and his unease grew even greater. That's because he joined later than I did. Wang's eyes and babble non-stop. Kinyu stood there uncomfortably, afraid to look up for a fear of being rude, yet tempted to flee. But he couldn't help but glance up, his mind already racing with thoughts. The three of them chatted for a while before Xiaozin's parents prepared dinner. Although Kinyu and Xiaozin had been eating fasting pills at the mountain gate, they still felt a craving for earthly food, so they joined the table. Kinyu's mind was in a tizzy during the meal, and he immediately recalled Master Wang's invitation to marry into the Wang family when he had invited him to the mountain. He didn't know why this thought had occurred to him. But speaking of it, now that he has become a cultivator, he can't marry immortal, right? Kinyu didn't know how he finished his meal, nor did he know how long it had been. He only knew that many people came to visit and praised Wang Xiaozin, and then, until it was getting dark, he and Wang Xiaozin prepared to sleep at home for the night. Kinyu naturally squeezed in with Wang Xiaozin. At this time, they were at the foot of the mountain and the spiritual energy was not sufficient, so the two of them naturally did not practice. Kinyu was calm at this time, and Xiaozin's two sisters had already gone to bed. Is your wound really caused by that idiot? Kinyu didn't know what he was thinking about before, but now he remembered what Xiaozin said to him during the day, so he asked. Wang Xiaozin nodded. The parents of Ursha are also such people, so naturally they raised such people. There was originally a brother Jin in the village. When we were bullied, he was old and helped us, but he went to the county in the first half of the year. Okay, since they are such a family, there is naturally no need to show mercy. Tomorrow I will go with you to teach them a lesson and leave them with some thoughts. I believe they will not bully the villagers in the future. Kinyu said. Wang Xiaozin nodded. Since Kinyu agreed, he was naturally happy. Speaking of Ursha's family, they were not sleepy at this time. After Ursha came back, he naturally did not dare to say that he had actually punched Wang Xiaozin. Wang Xiaozin was an immortal master. Bullying him before was fine, but now with his status, beating an immortal master is a big deal. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Ursha's parents went out to inquire and found out the whole story. Ursha's father had always been a thief, a habit he'd always had in the county. Later, after having his leg broken, he naturally became more restrained. Returning to the village, he became lazy, stealing and taking things from everywhere. He wouldn't have feared ordinary people, and no one in the village could be more ruthless. But those two were immortal masters, beings beyond the reach of mortals. All they could do was pray that the immortal master, considering they were all from the same clan, wouldn't go too far. The family was already spinning around at home, unsure what to do. They debated whether running away was an option or admitting their guilt was out of the question. Escape was impossible from the immortal master's grasp, a being capable of flight and flight. Admitting guilt was pointless, since their own son had assaulted him. How could they admit their guilt? Overwhelmed with worry, dawn had already arrived before they knew it. Kinyu and the others had been up all night, chatting until dawn. They knew the family's evil deeds, so they found a random excuse to leave and headed to Ursha's house. The courtyards in the village were originally connected, with each house standing in a row. Only Ursha's house, with its own entrance and courtyard, stood on the edge of the village, a testament to their character. The two knocked on the door, only a woman, submissively, opened it. Little Sanzi. With a fawning expression, Kinyu and the others ignored her and walked inside. As they entered, they were naturally seen by several passers-by, who engaged in a casual conversation, and the villagers gathered. Before Kinyu and the others even entered Ursha's house, they saw a middle-aged man with a fierce face, holding a bamboo pole, beating the naked Ursha violently. I told you not to bully the immortal master again. I told you not to bully others. You. Wang Xiaozin felt a sense of relief at seeing Ursha's father beating his own child. He was at a loss for words. Kinyu, unlike his average child, understood the situation and coughed softly. The man immediately stopped and led Ursha out the door, kneeling and kowtowed. Master Immortal, please forgive me, Master Immortal, this boy is ignorant and has offended you. Don't say anything. Let them handle their own affairs. Kinyu waved his hand and pulled the man away, motioning to Wang Xiaozin. Wang Xiaozin understood and stepped forward. The crowd outside gathered to see what was going on. Wang Xiaozin cast a spell, frightening the couple so much that they lost their minds. Although it was said that immortal masters in this place could not harm mortal lives at will, that was all a lie. If they hadn't massacred their entire village, how could the authorities intervene? Master Xiaozhen, please have mercy. We are all members of the Wang family. Ursha's father, seeing the mist rising, begged for mercy. Their family had a bad reputation in the village, and they were sure the villagers wouldn't help them. They were already terrified. Kinjentropy County originally belonged to the Wang family. Even if Wang Xiaozhen killed Ursha, they would have no ground for reason. Wang Xiaozhen didn't have the same anger as yesterday. He had already discussed this with Qin Yi the previous night, so he naturally didn't dare act rashly. He simply formed a water whip in his hand and lashed out at Ursha. A chill mixed with pain, and blood and flesh were etched into a mess. Ursha was a sturdy man, not young at all, and like his father, a ruthless man. He couldn't help but cry out. Wang Xiaozhen, feeling relieved, softened his grip and lashed out again. Ursha was already half fainted from the pain. After all, he was just a child, and had never experienced such pain. Qin Yi stepped forward to stop the beating. The couple immediately rushed forward and hugged Ursha, and the woman burst into tears. You two, we've been bullied before, and you don't do anything about it. Now he's doing this, he deserves it, Wang Xiaozhen said. You used idioms well. It seems Mr. Yamashita's teaching is not bad, Qin Yi said jokingly. Chapter 59 Jade Plate. The woman's face was filled with anger, but she dared not speak, only shedding tears. Your son is a human being, aren't we all? Look at the wound on my leg. When my parents came to see you, did you say a word? Wang Xiaozhen continued to scold, only giving Qin Yi a look in return. The idiot's father knew better than to provoke them again at this moment, so he kowtowed repeatedly and chattered non-stop. Seeing him like this, Wang Xiaozhen simply waved the water whip in his hand. If you dare to bully others again and I find out, I will beat you to death. And you? Wang Xiaozhen looked at the idiot's father, who was kneeling on the ground. The idiot's father quickly agreed. At this time, Wang Xiaozhen's father heard the news and rushed in, pulling Wang Xiaozhen away. Seeing the idiot's back and buttocks covered in blood and flesh, he scolded him. Wang Xiaozhen smiled sheepishly and left the room. Qin Yi followed behind, and the three of them returned home. Wang Xiaozhen's father was an honest and respectable man. Although Ursha's family had a bad reputation in the village, he had been a bit too harsh, so he pulled Wang Xiaozhen aside and lectured him. Xiaozhen, relying on his status as a cultivator, retorted, and the two argued until their faces turned red. Fortunately, Qin Yi intervened and lectured Wang Xiaozhen's father, and the matter was settled. They stayed at Wang Xiaozhen's house for another day. Although Qin Yi wanted to stay 2 more, he remembered the difference between immortals and mortals, and a short pain was better than a long one. So, the two of them set off again, flying towards the nearby Titao village. The Ursha family discussed their decision to leave the village. Their family had a bad reputation, and if Wang Xiaozhen returned, he might cause trouble again. However, since there was no place for them in other villages, they sold a few acres of land and headed for Kinjentropy County. Titao village wasn't too far away, but it was still some distance from Wang Xiaozhen's home. It took them over an hour to finally reach it. The villagers weren't surprised. Seeing Qin Yi return, accompanied by a 6 or 7-year-old child, they didn't even kneel, merely greeting and nodding. Qin Yi didn't care. He wasn't a member of the Wang family, so he didn't care. Wang Xiaozhen, however, didn't know the reason and asked Qin Yi about it, but Qin Yi simply made up an excuse to brush it off. Qin Yi hadn't planned to stay at home permanently, he had simply returned to ask his father about the inheritance. Qin Yi's parents were delighted to learn of his return, and they peppered him with questions about family matters. That evening, Qin Yi coaxed Wang Xiaozhen to bed before finding his parents. His parents understood what he wanted to ask, but, as he had told Wang De, Qin Yi's father was truly unaware of the situation. He simply recounted his experiences in Yizhao, which touched Qin Yi deeply. His father's hardships were indeed a source of discomfort. But since his father didn't know, Qin Yi felt reassured and went to bed, preparing to return to the mountain gate the next day. But late at night, Qin Yi's father quietly woke him up, and the two of them came outside. Seeing that his mother didn't come, Qin Yi seemed to understand something, so he flew him out of the village on his sword and lit a small lamp. "Dad, is there anything you haven't told me that you don't want mother to know?" Qin Yi asked. "It's not that I can't tell you. But I don't want to worry your mother." Qin Yi's father rubbed his hands together, looked up at the sky, and seemed to be recalling the past. That year, The officials came to confiscate our house, and I was sold as a minor. Before he finished speaking, Kenya interrupted. Dad, didn't you say you escaped during the raid and fled here? No, the government raided your house, so how could you escape? I only managed to escape later. Besides, we're all mortals, so it wasn't possible back then. Back then, all the kin family members, regardless of relationship, were taken away to work in the mines, and the women were taken to the provincial capital to work as prostitutes. Life in the mountains was tough, and even the older members of the family couldn't make it. I was still young, only in my early 20s, but I managed to make it. Back then, the people working the mines were all slaves, and the material they dug was a transparent stone. Now that I think about it, it's actually what's called a spirit stone. Spirit stone? Kenya was immediately intrigued. His father had said he didn't know about the existence of immortal masters, but it turned out there were cultivators where his family came from. Maybe he could find information about his heritage. Yes, I didn't know then. Now that I think about it, those overseers watching us were probably cultivators, though their cultivation levels probably weren't very high. Then how did you escape, Dad? Kenya asked. I don't know. I don't know how I escaped. I just fell into deep sleep after finishing my work that day, and when I woke up, I was in the wilderness. It must have been a cultivator from our family who rescued you. So, there must be cultivators in our family, Kenya analyzed. I think so. When I woke up, there was a plaque next to me. This is it. Kenya's father reached into his pocket and pulled out a jade plaque. It was exquisitely carved, gentle and smooth, and it was obvious that it was made of fine jade. Kenya took it. The character Kin was clearly inscribed on it. This jade plaque doesn't seem to contain any spiritual power. I can go back and ask my master to take a look. Kenya examined it carefully. Besides the character, there was nothing else. Don't, Kenya's father said. This item is probably related to our family. Don't show it to anyone easily, not even your mother. Although I now have a safe place to stay in the Wang family and the villagers are quite kind to me, I don't know what interests, love and hatred, or other entanglements we have behind us. So it's best not to let others see this item. Kenya nodded. Then how did you end up here, Dad? Kenya's father pulled out another J token, looking at Kenya in astonishment. At the time, I was penniless and could only wander the wilderness. Later, I met your Uncle Liu and fled with him. We first begged, then, forced into a desperate situation, so we wandered around and unknowingly ended up in Yizhou. We had planned to go to the central prefecture, a place of wealth, but we encountered thieves and your Uncle Liu died. I was later rescued by your mother, and I stayed here. Uncle Liu? Kenya asked instinctively. Yes, he's your third uncle's son, my cousin, and your uncle, Kenya's father said. Is this jade token his? Kenya asked. Yes, he woke up with a jade token next to him, just like me. I think the rest of the family was probably the same, but they got separated and can't be found. Seeing him lamenting the past, Kenya fell silent for a moment. Now that you've become an immortal cultivator, I'll give this jade token to you. After arriving here, I thought our kin family might also be an immortal cultivator family. When your master came to see me, I realized that our family might not be simple. If you meet him in the future, it depends on your own fate. Kenya took it and remained silent for a long time. After chatting for a while, the two returned to the village and fell asleep. When Kenya's father woke up the next morning, Kenya had already taken Wang's Iazan back to the mountains. There was only a small porcelain bottle on the table in the house, with a few red pills in it. Kenya's mother was illiterate, so she could only understand what was written on it when Kenya's father got up, so she didn't dare to touch it. Chapter 60, Qualitative Change at Level 50. Kenya's father came from a prominent family and had studied in his youth. He spent his days in the village, farming and occasionally writing letters for others. When he woke up that morning, he took the note from Kin's mother and read it. The bottle contained only a few blood-tonifying pills, useful even for mortals. These pills had been given by Wang. Kenya hadn't used them himself, but knowing they might be useful to mortals, he brought them back. Kenya had already returned to the mountain gate with Wang's Iazan. Seeing that they were fine, Wang Zimin didn't say much, simply urging them not to delay their cultivation. Wang hadn't emerged from seclusion yet, and it looked like he'd still be in seclusion for a few days. So, the two of them resumed their usual routine and began their cultivation in the mountains. When Wang De emerged 2 days later, everything in the mountains had returned to normal, and everyone was diligently cultivating. Wang De had successfully reached the 6th level of key training, a task not too complex. He had Wang Zi, a 7th level key training expert, guiding him ahead of time. His family also had many cultivation tips passed down by their predecessors, which made his cultivation smooth. Wang De was unaware of Qin Yi and Wang Zimin's return home, and Wang Zimin didn't mention it either, as nothing serious had happened. The two who had sneaked away certainly wouldn't mention it either. Upon emerging from retreat, Wang De immediately checked his system. His contribution points had reached 656. In a few days, he'd reached 999, which would allow him to upgrade his house to level 50. Such a large amount of contribution must have some special purpose. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste to use all the contributions he'd saved for so long in just one day? Ultimately, the daily contribution gains were too meager. Even though the children had officially begun their cultivation, their daily contributions only increased by a little over 10 points, and the amount fluctuated daily, dropping slightly with even a little slacking. Wang De carefully checked and discovered that during his first few days of retreat, Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen had only contributed 2 points daily. This was a bit strange, considering the other children were performing normally. Wang De captured them for questioning, only to discover that they had tricked Wang Zimin into leaving the mountain. Pressing him further, Wang Xiaozhen revealed his involvement. Wang De, while outwardly reprimanding them, didn't really take these matters seriously. After all, they were just mortals. As cultivators, a completely superior class, attacking a mortal wasn't a big deal. However, since they were all members of the Wang family, it still felt a bit inappropriate. However, the fact that they had sneaked off the mountain without permission struck Wang De as extremely serious. Without a set of rules, it would be difficult to manage the situation in the future. Wang Zimin had previously suggested restoring the old family rules, but Wang De felt that with so few people, strict regulations weren't necessary. Now, it seemed necessary to establish some rules. Without rules, there's no order. In this case, with only 7 children and 4 adults, the family was small, and they saw each other everywhere. Without rules, things could proceed smoothly, with the 4 adults taking the lead. But the 2 disciples had gone off the mountain without permission during Wang De's few days of retreat. While nothing had happened, if more people came, something might happen. Wang De considered the future, believing that the current situation with so few people was a good time to establish rules, so he called Wang Zimin over. Wang Zimin had been interested in this, so after hearing what Wang De had to say, he naturally went back to rummage through some of the family records, reorganized them, and then came to discuss it with Wang De. Wang De looked through them for a long time. Most of the items were feasible, but some were clearly difficult to implement. For example, the allocation of positions and the provision of elixirs and spirit stones for cultivation was impossible due to the family's current lack of assets. Wang De found the item regarding leaving the mountain. The original family rule allowed children from the mortal realm to leave the mountain for half a month each year, but this was difficult to implement at this time. These 8 children were all from the mortal realm, so how could they be allowed to leave the mountain alone at their age? After reading a few more items, Wang De simply tossed the rule aside. The current rules were completely unsuitable for the Wang family's current situation. Rewriting them would be time-consuming and laborious, and crucially, there was no one to oversee their implementation. It seemed that this could not be done at the moment, and could only be done after the children grew up and the family expanded. Wang Zimin naturally understood and said nothing, taking the rules and leaving alone. Seeing Wang Zimin so busy, with little time for cultivation, Wang De felt this was not right. However, he was the only one capable of handling matters in the family. Wang Lin practiced diligently every day, but he wasn't as experienced as Wang Zimin in many areas. Wang Zi, on the other hand, was even less capable than Wang Lin in many areas. She only practiced daily, taught Wang Yan, and did odd jobs. Fortunately, the children's cultivation was now on track, and they had some free time. These children practiced daily, and once a month, they went down the mountain to study for 5 days, learning to read and write. Wang Zimin was always with them. Rules still needed to be established, but for now, they could only establish a temporary and simple one. Wang De called the 7 children together and explained to them the incident of Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen leaving the mountain without permission. He then imposed a punishment of facing a wall in the back hills for 10 days. This was to serve as an example for them, so he could explain this temporary rule. The other 6 children listened attentively. Seeing the two facing the wall in the back hills, they naturally didn't dare leave the mountain without permission again. As for the other simple rules, he just explained them to the children. A few days slipped by, and Wang finally collected the 999 contribution points. He still had 5 more, for a total of 1004. Without hesitation, Wang upgraded his house. Wang, level 50, 999 contribution required. The system interface seemed unchanged. Another 999 points were needed to upgrade. Wang surveyed the house as before. It seemed nothing had changed, at least on the surface. Thinking it might be related to cultivation, Wang closed the door again, sat cross-legged, and tried practicing to see the effects. Again, there was no noticeable change in speed, only a slight increase in spiritual energy, not much different from the previous upgrade. Could it really just be an upgrade with no other effects? Wang's mouth twitched. Was it really that tricky? There had to be some other effect. Unconvinced, Wang punched the wooden board. A clang, a jarring sound, jarring Wang's arm. So that's what it was. Wang carefully examined the wooden walls of the house. Although they were made of strong wood, they were still ordinary. Wang, a cultivator at the 6th level of key training, couldn't even break them. Wang tried punching again, but it was as solid as a rock. Could it be that these 999 contributions increased the house's defense? Wang was somewhat certain. But what use would I have for this defense? It only strengthened the strong wood, making it harder to resist the cultivator's attacks. With this effect, who would break into his house without reason, unless someone was going to wipe out his entire family? Chapter 61 The Sun Family of Weapon Refining. Wang felt a little regretful. If he had saved a little more, he could have bought something practical, a technique, perhaps even spirit stones? Or perhaps upgraded other buildings. Ugh. Wang decided, treating the contributions to the house upgrade as if they were just dog food. However, after reaching level 50, the family scale had increased by several hundred points, not a small amount, really. Even if Wang had converted his contributions into spirit stones, he could only add about that many points. Wang Zimin, who had just come to inquire about Wang's family affairs, happened to see Wang surveying his own house. He came over to take a look. Chief, this house. Wang Zimin felt it with his hand, his face growing more shocked. Then, like Wang, he punched it, but it didn't break a single bit. Is this spiritual wood? How can it be so strong? Wang Zimin wondered to himself. Spiritual wood, isn't this just ordinary strong wood? Wang, curious, immediately used his spiritual power to investigate, and could actually sense spiritual energy bubbling within the walls. No, this isn't just any spiritual wood. It's this strong, it can even be used to refine magical weapons, Wang Zimin sighed. Clan leader, how did this strong wood in your house absorb so much spiritual energy and become spiritual wood? Is it valuable? Wang didn't answer, but instead asked. It is valuable. Strong wood of this strength is valuable, let alone spiritual wood, Wang Zimin said. If it were someone from outside, they'd probably take advantage of us because we don't know. Why don't I go to the Liu family and ask? They should have a weapon refiner, Wang said. No, the Liu family isn't good at weapon refining. I went there a while ago and saw they only have 2 weapon refiners. I'm afraid they don't know any more than I do. Then we'll have to look outside. There are many sects and families in Hejiafeng City that specialize in weapon refining, Wang replied. Yes, but speaking of key training, it reminds me of the Sun family. They're famous for weapon refining. While not the strongest, they're considered one of the best in the entire eastern region. Wang Zimin said. The Sun family? Is it one of the other 3 families that have been on friendly terms with our family for generations? Wang asked. Wang Zimin nodded. He wasn't familiar with the other 3 families, only the basics. Originally, in his family, although he was in charge of external affairs, most of his knowledge was related to the 5 spirit sect. Wang pondered this. Zhaoju had mentioned the Sun family during his last visit, and as the head of the Wang family, he should have paid them a visit. While the world of immortal cultivation is dominated by the law of the jungle, mutual assistance is essential, especially for these lower-level immortal families. Only by banding together can one become not 2, but 3. The relationships between the 4 families, maintained by their ancestors, are their very survival. Although Wang Da had a system, there were still things he didn't understand or didn't know about the entire immortal cultivation system. Take the Zhao family's wood-related cultivation, the cultivation of spiritual herbs and medicinal herbs, as well as spiritual trees and fruits, and they also dabbled in alchemy. Then there was weapon forging. Wang Da had only just discovered today that the Sun family excelled in this area. While these aspects were merely auxiliary to cultivation, they all played a vital role. There are only 4 people in the Wang family now. Although they know a lot of things, they are not experts after all. In the future, the family will prosper and develop, and they must have experts. At this time, Wang Da also had the idea of visiting the Sun family and the Zhao family. How is the Sun family doing now? Wang Da asked again. I don't know about that. During this period, everyone was at the family mountain gate, and no one from the Sun family came to visit, so we naturally don't know. Wang Zimin said. Wang Da nodded. The valuation is not urgent. You prepare. I will visit the Sun family tomorrow, mainly to check the situation. Wang Zimin saw that Wang Da also had the intention of continuing to make friends with the other 3 families, so he praised him and went down again. Wang Da naturally had some considerations in his mind when visiting this time. He could not just come and go as he did when he went to the Liu family. He wanted to learn from Zhao Ju and pay a formal visit, but on the one hand, he was not familiar with the place, and on the other hand, there was really no one at home, and now he was the only one who could spare the time. The next day, Wang Da went to the forest again and told Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen to go to Wangzi if they had any questions. He also changed into the family's Taoist robe, took a fine iron flying sword, put on a storage ring, and took all 3,500 spirit stones with him in case of accidents. It was really inappropriate to go alone, so Wang Da went to the Liu family first, ready to go with Liu Zixing. The 4 families all had intersections with each other, so it was natural to ask Liu Zixing to come. After not being there for a while, Wang Da found that the Liu family had regained its strength. In mid-air, Wang Da saw a light curtain. This was the light curtain of the clan protection formation. He didn't expect that the Liu family even had a clan protection formation. Wang Da felt a little ashamed. He could only comfort himself that it would be easier to get things done with more people. Since he couldn't fly in directly, Wang Da naturally flew to the foot of the mountain. The Dragon Gate was rebuilt. Next to it was a huge stone with 4 large characters engraved on it, which was quite impressive. Things that appear on the surface are indeed important. Wang Da thought of the mountain gate of his own family, which was still in a dilapidated state. He thought that there were not many spirit stones and the mountain gate was a little worn and dilapidated. Now he sighed after seeing it. A magnificent mountain gate is still very important. It is the face of a family. There was a boy at the door. He was the same age as Wang Da, but his cultivation was only at the first level of key training. He was probably a Liu family disciple who had just been accepted. Just like Wang Da accepted Qin Yi, the Liu family naturally had such children with poor spiritual roots and talents who had not been accepted before. Who are you and what is the business of coming to my Liu family's mountain gate? The boy saw Wang Da wearing a Taoist robe, holding a flying sword, slowly descending, calmly and with great dignity, so he raised his hand and asked, I am Wang Da, the head of the Qinjintang Wang family, and I come to visit the head of the Liu family. Wang Da bowed and said slowly, wait for me to inform him. The boy hadn't finished speaking. An old man landed in the air and bowed to Wang Da. Master Wang. This boy just came up the mountain not long ago, please forgive me. Wang Da naturally returned the greeting and waved his hand with a smile. No problem. The old man looked at the boy again. This is the head of the Wang family. You don't need to report to him when you see him in the future. Just let him go. The boy nodded hurriedly, and Wang Da went up the mountain with the old man. However, the boy felt a little depressed. The head of the Wang family is about the same age as me, but he is the patriarch of a family, while I am guarding the gate here. I think I am different from others. I heard from my master that I am so old when I just got started. Even if I work hard in the future, I am afraid I will not be able to reach the 5th level of key training. These second-generation cultivators are born with such good spiritual roots and have the resources for cultivation. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel jealous. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, The Rabbit's Death and the Fox's Grief. Wang had no idea what the boy was thinking, but as he ascended, he discovered that the Liu family mountain gate had been nearly rebuilt. At the foot of the mountain, 4 spiritual medicine gardens were already planted with spiritual herbs, and 2 spiritual fields were already being cultivated. Over a dozen disciples, dressed lightly, were busy wielding spiritual hoes. It was autumn and winter, and even at the mountain gate, the weather was still cold. If they cultivated the land now, they could plant spiritual rice next year. Further up, a newly built library was also guarded by 2 boys. Wang didn't bother to look at it, only muttering to himself, even if we build a library, I'm afraid we won't have 2 boys to guard it. Liu Xingxing, aware of Wang's visit, flew down on his sword and ascended with him. Naturally, flying a sword in someone else's house was not allowed, as a courtesy. The 2 of them walked together, and the old man withdrew. This mountain is quite well built, Wang joked. Liu Xingxing smiled sheepishly. I didn't do much. It's all thanks to the unity of our clan that we've recovered somewhat in such a short time. Continuing up, they came to a vast training room, 3 large spirit gathering formations, and various areas for practicing different techniques, each divided into the 5 elements. A dozen or so disciples, all 6 or 7 years old, were diligently cultivating, never slacking off. In the mortal world, few disciples possess spiritual roots. We were able to recruit a dozen this time, and there are quite a few with inferior roots. Seeing Wang's gaze, Liu Xingxing explained. Wang nodded. That's true in the mortal world. My Wang family only has 7 or 8 members, and we're only the seed of the family now. Continuing up, they came to a palace under construction. Apparently, there was only the foundation, and it was unknown how long it would take. The main hall isn't finished yet. Let's talk in the back, Liu Xingxing said. Wang walked with him to a courtyard. What's your business? Liu Xingxing asked directly. I'd like to visit the Sun family, but none of the other family members are available, so I'd like to invite you along for a formal visit, Wang said straight to the point. Liu Xingxing, upon hearing this, looked at Wang with a meaningful expression. Actually, I've been meaning to do the same, but I haven't had the time. We've been busy building the mountain gate, and because of what happened back then, the Sun family has relocated to Mount Wheelie. We're afraid we won't be back for a day or 2. Our 4 families have been friends for generations. We should have visited them during this difficult time, and when Zhao Ju came last time, Before Wang could finish his words, a middle-aged woman entered. We previously advised the clan leader to visit each family, and now that Patriarch Wang is here, it would be best for the clan leader to come along. Liu Xingxing immediately stood up and saluted, clearly an important elder of the Liu family. Wang couldn't tell the woman's cultivation level, so he naturally bowed as well. Although Liu Xingxing looked hesitant, he couldn't refuse and agreed. He was young and naturally inexperienced in the world. It wasn't that he didn't want to go, but he didn't know how to go. He was also afraid of the social etiquette and was naturally a little apprehensive about such things. Now that Wang had arrived, it seemed like the 2 of them could go together, which would be helpful. They spent half a day preparing. Since the Sun family was too far away, even the Liu family didn't know what the Sun family's current situation was, so they also brought some spirit stones, some medicinal pills, and some animal skins and animal pills. Only then did Wang realize that the Liu family, while not much different from the Wang family, excelled in combat, which was why they had been able to retain so many of their descendants despite this disaster. Many of the Liu family's descendants went out for trials and hunted monsters, making them quite formidable in combat. However, it was just a matter of taking advantage of 1 advantage over 10. After all, combat was a necessity for every cultivator. The 2 of them set out like this. Liu Xingxing followed behind a sturdy man and 3 young disciples, all neatly dressed in matching Taoist robes. Wang was alone. Wang had seen this burly man before, on his previous trip to Mulan sect with Liu Xingxing, but he didn't know his name. He only knew that his cultivation level was at the 9th level of key training, a highly advanced one within the Liu family. Therefore, whenever Liu Xingxing ventured out, he would follow, protecting the Liu clan patriarch. The group soared on their swords, passing through the Liu clan's mountain gate, passing through several mountains and rivers, avoiding the gates of other clans. They also passed by a sect within the 7 Great Sects Alliance, called Shangguan Dao, but the group apparently didn't visit. Before they knew it, darkness had fallen. Cultivators rarely needed sleep, so they continued their flight through the night, arriving only the next morning. It's quite far. Wang couldn't help but sigh. The Liu family members remained silent, with only Liu Zixing standing alongside Wang. The Sun family originally lived in our area, but back when the Five Spirit sect took control of the eastern region, they had a grudge against the Five Spirit sect, so they moved here. Having a grudge against the Five Spirit sect, doesn't that mean they haven't suffered? Wang asked. Not really. They were originally dependent on Shangzhuang Valley. For hundreds of years, they've had some interactions with our three families, but not as good as before, Liu Zixing said. Wang nodded, guessing something. Originally, it was because of the relationship between Shangzhuang Valley and the Five Spirit sect that things were like this. Master asked me to come here because of this. Now that Shangzhuang Valley and the Five Spirit sect are gone, our four families should be able to return to their old ways, Liu Zixing added. I didn't expect there was such a history here. I was completely unaware of it, Wang said. You're too young. You naturally don't know these things. Even the two people in your family are young and don't know much, Liu Zixing said. As they spoke, the group had already reached the air outside the mountain gate. It seems that there is no clan protection formation. Is this Sun family the same as my Wang family? Wang said. Liu Zixing also checked, but there was no clan protection formation. But the group still knew that even if there was no clan protection formation, they still had to visit through the mountain gate and should not fly up directly. At the exit of the mountain, there was only one stone left of the dragon gate, and the rest were in ruins. The group sighed at this time. They did not expect that the Sun family would be in such trouble. There was no one at the gate. There was a person behind Liu Zixing, who shouted at the mountain gate with a voice as loud as thunder. After a long time, no one came down, so the person shouted again. After waiting for another half a day, it was obvious that there was no one at the mountain gate. The group decided to go up the mountain. Wang also felt strange. Why was there no one in Wheelie Mountain? The last time Zhao Ju came to visit, he said he would also come to the Sun family. If there was no one at the Sun family mountain gate, I am afraid that they had been wiped out, right? The group suddenly felt desolate. Since there was no one around, they decided to head down the mountain to search for any talented disciples, hoping to prevent the Sun family from losing its lineage to cultivation. Both of them were young, having served as heads of their respective families, and had also suffered misfortunes. Seeing this, they couldn't help but feel a sense of grief. Just as the group was about to enter the mountain gate, a voice rang out from behind. Who are you? What are you doing in Wheelie Mountain? The childish voice made everyone turn to look. A young girl, about 10 years old, held a flying sword, her hair a little disheveled. She held a bag, its contents were unknown, but it didn't look like a storage bag. Everyone was a bit bewildered, examining the little girl with a puzzled expression. But Wang stepped forward and bowed. I am the head of the Congentropi Wang family, Wang. This is. Wang didn't finish, asking Liu Zixing to introduce himself. Liu Zixing understood and bowed, introducing himself. Then he found it amusing. This little girl was so young, it made him completely uncaring. A 14-year-old boy like Wang spoke maturely, giving him the air of being in an adult world. This little girl really made him feel unremarkable. So he took a step forward and got a little closer. Little girl, are you from the Sun family? Chapter 63 The current situation of the Sun family. Yes, my name is Sun Xiaoxio, the little girl replied. Why is there no one at your mountain gate? Liu Zixing asked. Am I not a human? Sun Xiaoxio's childish voice retorted. I mean, sir, a cultivator, the kind that flies in the sky, Liu Zixing said, gesticulating with joy. The people behind him covered their eyes. This clan leader was too playful. I am, look. Sun Xiaoxio swung her sword forward. You're a cultivator, so why can't I tell your level of cultivation? Is it possible that you haven't yet absorbed spiritual energy? Liu Zixing smiled. You haven't absorbed spiritual energy yet? Sun Xiaoxio's face was filled with anger. Liu Zixing had actually mocked her. She extended a small hand forward, and a powerful force struck Liu Zixing's abdomen directly. Liu Zixing flew backwards, blood gushing from his mouth. The people behind him were already shocked and rushed to support him. They had never expected this little girl to be able to send their clan leader, who had reached the 7th level of weapon refinement, flying with a single palm strike. Even the burly man at the 9th level of key training had been keeping an eye on the little girl, but like Liu Xingxing, he hadn't detected any trace of spiritual energy. It wasn't until he attacked just now that he realized the little girl's spiritual energy fluctuations were even more powerful than his own, which meant her cultivation level was higher than his. Sun Xiaoxiao looked smug and was about to attack again, but Wang De quickly stepped forward. Senior, calm down. Our Wang and Liu families are old friends with your Sun family. Liu Xingxing wasn't teasing. Wang De had been so polite before because he had noticed something unusual about the little girl. He couldn't detect any trace of her cultivation level, which was puzzling. Wang De, himself at the 6th level of key training, couldn't see her cultivation level. One possibility was that the little girl had no cultivation level, or another was that her cultivation level was so high that she was automatically concealing her spiritual energy, making it invisible to him. For example, someone like Wang Zuzi, dressed in peasant clothes, looked like a country bumpkin. Wang De had seen Wang Zuzi and Zisuo before, but if he hadn't seen them flying through the air without any control, Wang De wouldn't have noticed a single trace of spiritual energy emanating from them. Are you the head of the Wang family? Sun Xiaoxiao asked, her voice childish. Wang De nodded. That big brother mentioned the Zhao family, the Wang family, and the Liu family, Sun Xiaoxiao said to herself, seemingly having trouble remembering. Wang De, upon hearing big brother, had assumed she was an elder, a veteran demon or something. The term big brother clearly indicated his previous misjudgment, considering only their age. He hadn't expected her to be a young girl with such high cultivation. What had happened to the Sun family? Are you talking about Zhaoju? He came to our Wang family before he came here, Wang De said. Yes, the little girl nodded. Yes, that's brother Zhaoju. He even bought me a lot of things. Seeing her smile, Wang De knew her anger had subsided. After all, she was just a teenage girl, and her emotions were clearly visible on her face. Sun Xiaoxiao was also wary. With his Sun family now in such a predicament, and this group of people she had never met before, she naturally remained wary. She still remembered Zhao Ju's name, but hadn't mentioned it. When Wang De mentioned it, she believed it a little, but only a little. Liu Xingxing was being helped to his feet, but he was clearly quite a distance away from the two of them. Wang De walked over and whispered, "Hurry up and apologize. This young woman's cultivation is so high that all of us combined probably wouldn't be her match." Liu Xingxing understood the situation well, and not wanting to be dismissive, he bowed to Sun Xiaoxiao. As Wang De explained, Sun Xiaoxiao led them up the mountain. The desolate landscape was endless, with many ruins still untouched, and many precious materials were hidden within. The Sun family, accustomed to refining artifacts, had a vast collection of fine iron and spiritual wood, but by now, their spirituality had been completely lost, becoming mere commonplace. After walking for a long time and taking many detours, they finally reached the top of the mountain. There was only one thatched hut and one wooden cabin on the mountain, about the same size, but both were drab and simple. "You guys can sit here. We don't have that many benches on the mountain," Sun Xiaoxiao said to Wang De, gesturing to the grassy area nearby. The group sat down on the ground without making any formalities. "Tell me, what are you doing here?" Sun Xiaoxiao asked, then suddenly remembered what Wang De had said before and added a few words. "Oh, yes, you're from the Wang and Liu families. Tell us why you're the only one left on the mountain," Wang De asked. "They're all dead." Sun Xiaoxiao's face was expressionless. A group of people in white clothes burned this place to the ground. Brother Zhaoju told me they were from the Five Spirit sect, but they're dead now too. The group looked at each other, unsure how to respond. "I escaped because of my higher cultivation level, but I couldn't save the others," Sun Xiaoxiao continued. "What realm are you in?" Wang De casually asked. "Early Foundation establishment stage," Sun Xiaoxiao replied. Several people nearby gasped. She was in the middle stage of Foundation establishment. Apparently, this little girl had held back against Liu Xingxing earlier. "You have a top-grade spiritual root?" Wang De wasn't surprised. He had seen Wang Zuzi in action and had some contact with him before, and this little girl was clearly even more formidable than Wang Zuzi. "Yes, I have a single, top-grade, gold-type spiritual root. My father said I'd be the pride of our family and lead them to prosperity. It's a shame he can't see it." Sun Xiaoxiao's expression remained calm, her head lowered slightly. Wang De saw that she was trying hard to conceal her inner anxiety and fear. It's okay, everything will be fine. It's similar for our Wang family. Wang De instinctively wanted to pat her head or shoulder to comfort her. But remembering her early-stage foundation establishment cultivation, he didn't reach out. Then your Sun family should have children in the mortal world. You're in the early stage of foundation establishment, and you have top-grade spiritual roots. I believe that if we recruit more children to come to the mountain, the Sun family will surely prosper, Liu Zixing said instinctively, a hint of fear still on his face from the previous blow. Brother Zhaoju said the same thing the last time he came. However, the Sun family members who are suitable for cultivation in the mortal world are too young. I'm not even old enough myself, so I can't lead them in the mountains, and it's not safe either. So, I let them live in Wheelie County. I take them up the mountain to practice every day and return at night. I was about to take them up the mountain, but I discovered you, so I sent them back, Sun Xiaoxiao said. Truly a shared plight. The Sun family has fallen into such a predicament. Wang De not only thought of himself, with his system, but also of Sun Xiaoxiao, who possessed a supreme spiritual root. It seemed both of them would shoulder the heavy responsibility of reviving the family. You're right. We must be wary of unfamiliar cultivators. Although you're in the early stages of foundation building, you're too young and probably don't have much combat experience. Even with the 7 sects alliance now established, the eastern part remains unstable. Wang De's words echoed his own thoughts. Sun Xiaoxiao nodded. Well, although my cultivation is high, I haven't practiced enough magic. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been the only one to escape. Sun Xiaoxiao seemed to be recalling the past. In fact, when the 5 spirit sect disciples attacked, there was only one disciple in the early stage of foundation building. However, she had no combat experience. She was entangled by that disciple and had no power to fight back. She was unable to save others and could only watch her family and loved ones being killed one by one. That feeling of powerlessness made her endure things that her age should not have to endure. After all, she was only a 10-year-old girl. Let's go see how the children of the Sun family are doing? Wang De stood up and said to Sun Xiaoxiao. The mountain gate was so dilapidated that there was not even a place to sit. Chapter 64 The current situation of the Sun family. The group flew down the mountain on their swords, arriving at Wa'al County. Although the Sun family now only had one cultivator, Sun Xiaoxiao, they still had many mortal disciples. A courtyard had been built within the county government for them to live in. Because Sun Xiaoxiao was too young to care for herself, the Sun family members, including those working in the government, made this courtyard the primary residence. The mortals of Yizhao were different from those in other places. While the prefecture had a clear rule prohibiting cultivators from slaughtering mortals, they were still mortals, and the prefecture had no control over them unless it were a massacre. So, they came not only because of their surname, Sun, but also because they needed a safe place to live. In places without the protection of immortal cultivators or powerful forces, mortals were like grass. Now that the Sun family's mountain gate was in such a state, they wanted to support the Sun cultivators. Firstly, to provide protection for Wa'al, and secondly, to allow every Sun family member to possess spiritual roots and cultivate. Outside the courtyard, 2 strong men guarded the gate. Upon seeing Sun Xiaoxiao and the group descend, one of them immediately ran to the county government office to report, while the other remained on standby. The group landed in the courtyard. Inside, a dozen or so children were well behaved. A teacher was teaching them a certain kind of Confucianism. Upon seeing Sun Xiaoxiao and the group land, the teacher bowed and hurried out. Normally, this was a time for training, but Wang De and his group had arrived, so the class resumed. After a brief conversation, a group of Yamen runners, accompanied by 3 people, trotted in. The leader, a middle-aged man, pulled Sun Xiaoxiao over. More Yamen runners stood in front of the group, separating Liu Zixing from Wang De and his group. Clan leader, who are they? The leader asked Sun Xiaoxiao. They're from the Wang and Liu families, Sun Xiaoxiao quickly said. Wang De and Liu Zixing simply smiled. With the Sun family in such a state, it was only natural for these mortals to react this way. Greetings, the leading middle-aged man bowed. Though immortal, he held the position of magistrate of Wheelie County, making him a distinguished figure among mortals. He was naturally aware of the affairs of the Liu, Wang, Zhao, and Sun families. However, given the Sun family's current situation, with many independent cultivators seeking to target the Wheelie Mountain Gate, he naturally had to be cautious. He had confirmed Zhao Ju's identity during his last visit, and since Zhao Ju had provided them with considerable assistance, he naturally confirmed his identity. Wang De, Liu Xingxing, and their group naturally returned the greeting. I'm truly sorry, but our Sun family is in such a precarious position that we have to be cautious. Since you claim to be from the Liu and Wang families, do you have any proof? The magistrate asked. Wang De and Liu Xingxing glanced at each other. Proof? How could they prove it? For a moment, they were at a loss as to how to prove themselves. He even mentioned Zhao Ju's brother's name before. Sun Xiaoxiao interjected. Clan leader, Zhao Ju is the head of the Zhao family. It's not surprising they know Zhao Ju's name, the county magistrate replied. The Sun family's greatest asset now is Sun Xiaoxiao, the enemy's only infiltration point. That's why they reside in the county town, not a mountain gate. At this moment, the burly man behind Liu Xingxing stepped forward, stamped his feet, and raised his fists to the sky. This is our Liu family's unique technique, the thick-splitting fist. It proves our identity, right? The county magistrate was bewildered. He was immortal, how could he know what unique Liu family techniques were? Clan leader, why don't we leave? This Sun family's behavior is truly unhospitable, the young man behind Liu Xingxing said. Liu Xingxing waved his hand, silencing him. He then pulled a flying sword from his stored ring and tossed it to Sun Xiaoxiao. This flying sword of mine was passed down to me by my father. I heard it was personally forged by the head of the Sun family. Take a look and see if it's true. Seeing him become serious, Sun Xiaoxiao felt a little better about him. She took the flying sword, examined it, and then said to the county magistrate beside her. It truly bears our Sun family's mark, so it must have been forged by us. Our sect is famous for its weaponry, so we naturally sell countless flying swords and other items. This cannot be proven, the county magistrate continued. Look at the hilt of the flying sword. Just a little spiritual power will activate it, Liu Xingxing said. Sun Xiaoxiao grasped the flying sword in her hand, and powerful spiritual power poured into it. With a boom, a long thread of golden spiritual energy gushed out. This flying sword holds a secret. It's the product of the unique weapon refining method of the former Sun family patriarch. The hilt isn't an ordinary spiritual wood, but a small magical weapon crafted from 100-flower stone. It allows for unexpected attacks in combat, especially when wielding the sword in combat. You should have known this at the mountain gate, right? Liu Xingxing asked. Sun Xiaoxiao nodded. Although I'm only a mortal disciple, after ascending the mountain, the patriarch personally accepted me as his disciple, and I've learned weapon refining techniques. I don't know how to refine this unique method, but I've seen it before. My master said this kind of flying sword is too treacherous and will only be given away, not sold. Sun Xiaoxiao gazed at the long golden thread, relinquished her spiritual energy, and the hilt returned to its original state, like an ordinary flying sword. Wang De was naturally surprised. This flying sword looked ordinary, only slightly better than his own fine iron longsword, but he hadn't expected it to hold such a secret. In combat, wielding it would be a truly insidious and difficult weapon to defend against. Although immortal, the county magistrate was well informed. He had never seen a flying sword like this before, but he had heard of it. He was now somewhat convinced and continued to ask Sun Xiaoxiao, has the clan leader seen one similar to this before? It doesn't look the same. The magic weapon at the hilt is clearly nurtured by gold element spiritual energy, but the hilt is identical, Sun Xiaoxiao replied. The county magistrate was now largely convinced and quickly exchanged a polite greeting. Liu Xingxing simply smiled in return. Wang De, still saluting the uniqueness of the flying sword, only gave a perfunctory response. The county magistrate escorted the group to the county government office, while the children continued their classes. After several rounds of hospitality, despite the old friendship between the four families, they were deeply moved by the presence of the Liu and Wang families. The Sun family, despite having Sun Xiaoxiao, a foundation establishment stage clan leader, was indeed facing greater difficulties than the Wang family. This was primarily due to the issue of educating their disciples. Sun Xiaoxiao possessed considerable cultivation, but she had no idea how to teach her disciples. Furthermore, she was too young to even read or write. Beyond her own family's techniques and spells, she knew nothing about anything else, unable to even articulate a general outline. She also couldn't understand the family's classics. While many of the mortals in the county government could understand them, they were all mortals, unable to put them into practice or apply them. Now, she was left groping in the dark, her family no longer a part of her, no more so than an ordinary independent cultivator. Secondly, there was the issue of cultivation resources. While the mountain gate remained, its various properties lay abandoned and withered. Sun Xiaoxiao had only mastered a limited grasp of the Sun family's prized weapon refining techniques. Even forging a simple flying sword was difficult. Knowing she possessed exceptional spiritual roots, the family naturally focused their efforts on cultivating her cultivation, teaching her only the basics. The Sun family, fortunately, had the resources and spirit stones left by Zhaozhu last time to survive, but they could only spend them by breaking one spirit stone into two. After all, without income, they could only sit and wait for death. Sun Xiaoxiao, unable to cultivate daily, relied solely on her own cultivation to gather spirit stones in the mountains, wasting countless hours and squandering her supreme spiritual roots. Gathering spirit stones for cultivators was a thankless task reserved for casual cultivators, and the rewards were minimal. Wang thought again of himself. Fortunately, he had a system that allowed him to plan for the future, eliminating the need to waste time and effort on short-term resources like spirit stones. Chapter 65 The current situation of the Sun family. In the afternoon, at Wang's request, the group prepared to head up the mountain. Alright, everyone, pack up and follow me up the mountain to practice. Sun Xiaoxiao commanded the dozen or so children. The children were clearly obedient, each bringing their own supplies and preparing everything. Then, Sun Xiaoxiao produced a metal lotus seed, a magical weapon, and began to cast a spell. Suddenly, a flaming lotus blossomed in the courtyard, and the children skillfully climbed atop it one by one. Do you want to come up? This magical weapon is much faster than flying swords, Sun Xiaoxiao asked Wang and his group. We can fly swords. You go ahead. Liu Zixing said quickly, not wanting to share a magical weapon with the young girl. Sun Xiaoxiao nodded and flew away. This flying magical weapon is amazing, the burly man behind Liu Zixing exclaimed. It's really fast, Liu Zixing remarked. Clan leader, I'm not talking about speed. It's that while this magical weapon is only a flying one, it also possesses defensive properties. Every leaf on its exterior is meticulously crafted, allowing for both attack and defense, the old man said. Liu Zixing then took a closer look, only to discover that Sun Xiaoxiao had already flown away. Indeed, but even if we were given this magical weapon, we wouldn't be able to use it. Just activating it, the spiritual energy is immense. Even from here, I can feel the vastness of it, Wang said. After all, she's in the Foundation establishment stage, a different realm from us, Liu Zixing joked, noting their days. The group flew back toward the mountain gate. Once there, Sun Xiaoxiao began training with them, practicing breathing exercises and cultivating their ki. Wang, Liu Zixing, and the others were nearby, offering guidance whenever they encountered any problems. Sun Xiaoxiao was so young and naturally gifted, so her own training must have been rapid. Unfortunately, these disciples were so innately lacking, and her own lack of experience made her guidance seem inadequate. For example, when it came to sensing spiritual energy, Sun Xiaoxiao, during her own practice, sensed it within 2 days, and it entered her body within 4. This group had been practicing for over 2 months, yet some couldn't even sense it. Wang, watching from the sidelines, felt that Sun Xiaoxiao's teaching was simply not working. These children were already lacking in talent, and it would be difficult for them to become cultivators. He stepped forward to instruct them, explaining the intricacies of breathing techniques and the importance of not rushing to sense spiritual energy it required. Liu Zixing and his group, following behind, were helping them clean up the debris in the mountains. The Sun family's ruins, unlike those of other families, contained precious materials. While their spiritual power had been lost, their strength remained. With a little refinement, they could be sold at the market for a considerable sum. The group worked all morning, with Wang alone teaching them for half the day until noon. Wang had previously listened to Wang Zimin and Wang Lin teach the Wang family members, so he shared what he knew. Although Sun Xiaoxiao had a high level of cultivation, she clearly didn't know as much as Wang, so she sat down to listen. By noon, Wang Da's mouth was dry. In his excitement, he spilled everything. How much they could learn depended on their own efforts. Big brother, could you stay a few more days and continue teaching me? Sun Xiaoxiao immediately recognized Wang Da's value. She was struggling to teach them, and he seemed like the perfect person. Wang Da hesitated. Although he wanted to help the Sun family, he couldn't leave for long. He discussed with Liu Zixing and decided to stay for 3 days, as a way to help the Sun family. For the next 3 days, Wang Da taught the children daily, explaining as much as he could, in detail, so that Sun Xiaoxiao could learn some lessons about teaching, so that she wouldn't have a life of cultivation without the experience of nurturing future generations. Liu Zixing and the others continued to clean up the debris, sorting the materials for Sun Xiaoxiao and sending them to Wa'al County in batches. Later, Sun Xiaoxiao would refine them and sell them for spirit stones. This would be a way to recycle waste, so she wouldn't have to rely solely on gathering spirit stones to survive. By the next day, the other children had trouble understanding Wang Da's teachings. They hadn't officially entered cultivation yet, and Wang Da was eager for success. Sun Xiaoxiao, on the other hand, was incredibly insightful and memorized everything Wang Da said. Feeling somewhat relieved, Wang Da explained the teachings to her alone, hoping she would learn more. The Liu family members went to the county capital to find the Sun family's mortal magistrate and sorted through the remaining Sun family books, categorizing them into various categories: exercises, spiritual herbs, and illustrated guides of spiritual medicines. They selected suitable cultivation manuals and texts, organized them, and had Sun Xiaoxiao study these Sun family texts in order. They would then teach them, treating this group as a trial and error process. At least next year's new disciples would be taught the correct methods. Zhaoju and his group had already cleared most of the ruins, and this time, Liu Zixing cleared a few more, revealing the remnants of a cultivation area. Sun Xiaoxiao saw it all. Though young, she understood that Wang Da and Liu Zixing, like Zhaoju, were here to help her. Wang Da had also gone to the county town to sort through the scattered Sun family classics and discovered a series of books on weapon refining. Among them were, of course, basic refining books available for purchase. Wang Da didn't value these. Many contained the refining experiences of the Sun family's ancestors, including the insights of highly skilled weapon refiners. These were out of print, a summary of a person's lifelong experience in weapon refining, and naturally, they were of paramount importance. Unfortunately, these mortals simply didn't understand the importance of these casually written books, prioritizing only the basic, published works. Fortunately, Liu Zixing and Wang Da had come and carefully preserved these materials for them. Wang Da himself, after all, spent a long time perusing them, but clearly didn't understand much. After all, he hadn't even begun to understand weapon refining. His family's future development would undoubtedly require weapon refiners and alchemists, but the Wang family's children weren't particularly skilled in these areas. He could come here to learn from them. However, that only requires Sun Xiaoxiao to revitalize the Sun family, otherwise it would be useless. After carefully searching through these books, there are detailed descriptions of the types of spiritual wood, which are similar to those in the outside world. However, there is no description of the spiritual wood used in Wang Da's house. It seems that the materials used in the system upgrade are indeed not available in the outside world. This also strengthened Wang Da's idea of demolishing the house and selling it. After all, scarcity makes things valuable. Chapter 66: Preparing to sell the house. Are you really leaving? 3 days passed, and Liu Zixing and Wang Da's group had provided considerable assistance, but they could only offer their limited assistance. Wang Da nodded, having become quite familiar with the young woman over the past few days. Wang Da estimated that although Sun Xiaoxiao had reached the early stages of foundation establishment, her combat capabilities were probably only enough to deal with those in the key condensation stage. While she had learned many techniques, she wasn't proficient in their application, and she had no combat experience. But that was enough. With such an invincible being below foundation establishment, capable of dealing with key condensation cultivators solely with her immense spiritual power, this mountain gate was considerably safer than the Wang family. It was simply that human hearts were unpredictable, which was why Zhaoju had allowed them to reside in the mortal realm. Wang Da, after interacting with them for the past few days, had a vague sense of truth in this. As the group said goodbye, Wang Da simply instructed them to come to Conjentropy Mountain if they needed help. Sun Xiaoxiao didn't know where Congentropi Mountain was, so Wang pointed in a direction. Just keep flying in this direction and you'll find it. Sun Xiaoxiao exclaimed, oh, and waved goodbye. Everything was up to them. Wang De and Liu Zixing had both left him some spirit stones. Wang De wasn't wealthy himself, so he only left 500. Liu Zixing, however, was generous and left 5,000, which was considered his contribution. It also served to maintain some family ties. This was the first time the patriarchs of the four families had met each other, just like four powerful cultivators thousands of years ago establishing their families and establishing a foothold in eastern Yizhao. After returning, everyone diligently cultivated in an orderly manner. Wang Zimin and the other two, knowing Wang De had returned, naturally came to inquire about his situation. Wang De's explanation of the Sun family's situation elicited a sigh of relief from Wang Zimin and Wang Lin, who felt that it was indeed even worse off than the Wang family. Qin Yi and Wang Xiaozhen also came to see their master, but Wang De ignored them, offering a few words and letting them return to their cultivation. Then he called Wang Zimin over, intending to chop off a piece of his house with his flying sword. This spiritual wood was incredibly strong, and even with Wang Zi's 7th level key training, even a full-strength attack couldn't cut it. Wang De had no choice but to remove the wooden pins, break off a complete piece, and store it in his stored ring. Then, he went out alone to Heiji Market to inquire about prices. Wang De felt that this kind of spiritual wood, unavailable outside, would surely fetch a good price. The streets were sparsely populated, mostly casual cultivators. Wang De walked down until he found a shop selling spiritual wood. A casual look revealed that the prices for these spiritual woods were generally fixed, with some families or factions specializing in the production of spiritual wood. What would you like, fellow Taoist? A waiter approached, unfazed by Wang De's youth. Just a quick look. Do you have any spiritual wood that can be used for refining weapons? Wang De asked casually. Of course not. Since you're a refiner, you should know that most spiritual woods are fragile and can't be used to refine magical weapons. Basic magical weapons are usually made with refined iron, the waiter said. Wang De nodded. Refined iron is different from spiritual wood. The spiritual energy contained in spiritual wood is different, as is its nature. Yes, if there really were spiritual wood strong enough to be used to refine magical weapons, I'm guessing it would be quite expensive, the clerk agreed. How much do you think spiritual wood with similar strength to refined iron could fetch? Wang De asked casually. That depends on the wood. Different materials, different spiritual energy, different properties, and naturally different prices. If spiritual energy is scarce, it's just ordinary wood, no matter how strong it is, it's useless, the clerk said. Oh, is there such a classification? Wang De asked. None of the four members of the Wang family knew how to refine weapons, so naturally they didn't understand the ins and outs of it. Of course there are, like this spiritual wood, the clerk pointed to the side. This is ordinary pine spiritual wood. Because it's a pine tree, the material is inferior, so the price is naturally low. This one over here is the ginkgo tree, a spiritual tree in its own right. Its wood properties are strong, and it has the effect of calming the spirit. This kind of spiritual wood is very expensive. While the spiritual energy is similar, the material is different, so the price is naturally different. Wang De examined the ginkgo spiritual wood carefully. The moment he touched it, he felt a sense of freshness, a sense of relaxation and joy. It was truly magical. The pine spiritual wood, on the other hand, only had a sense of spiritual energy, nothing else. It also had a pure woody scent. Having said that, Wang De could estimate it himself. The clerk was clearly not lying, so he pulled the wood from his stored ring. Take a look at this piece of spiritual wood. Give me an estimate. Wang De only asked for an estimate, clearly not intending to confirm it right away. The clerk was also a cultivator and a newly minted weapon refiner. Naturally, he examined it carefully, then, impressed by its extraordinary qualities, immediately pulled out a small file. Shall I file it a little bit and see? The clerk asked Wang De. Wang De nodded, and the clerk infused it with spiritual energy. The file became incredibly sharp, and a single scratch on the wood left only a tiny mark, no sawdust at all. The clerk, feeling something extraordinary, quickly spoke again. This spiritual wood is surprisingly strong. My skills can't test it. Wait, I'll have my master come take a look. Wang De nodded. He had a rough idea of the wood's value. It shouldn't be too expensive. Because it was inherently strong, he dared to offer it. Otherwise, he knew not to show off his wealth. From behind the curtain, an older woman emerged. It was clear that her cultivation level was beyond Wang's comprehension. The woman glanced at Wang, then at the spiritual wood nearby. She also pulled out a file, but this one was clearly of a higher quality than the previous one. With a gentle scratch, another curl of sawdust fell. The woman examined the wood chips carefully for a long moment, then pulled out a small alchemy furnace and dropped the chips in. A tiny flame slowly rose, the furnace shifted, and the wood chips instantly caught fire. "Is this spiritual wood yours?" the woman asked. Wang nodded. "Where did you get it from?" the woman continued. "No comment, I just want to know the price." Wang said immediately. "It's about 10 times stronger than ordinary strong wood, and a little less hard than fine iron. But it's spiritual wood, and it's very useful for cultivators with wood spiritual roots, and its applications are wide. If you only have this one piece, I can help you sell it for a good price," the woman said. "More than one," Wang said. "How many?" the woman asked. "No comment," Wang said. "We don't have this in the East. You must have gotten it from somewhere else. But I warn you, the situation in the East has been tense lately, with external forces infiltrating. If you make money like this, beware of an investigation by the 7 Great Sects Alliance," the woman said. As soon as she saw Wang, she knew he was not a casual cultivator, but a member of a family. It was easy to distinguish between a cultivator who cultivated systematically and a casual cultivator who cultivated spiritual power in a disorderly manner. Chapter 67. I feel like I'm going to get rich. "Don't worry, it has nothing to do with outside forces," Wang said. "Since it has nothing to do with external forces, then you must have cultivated it yourselves. This actually intrigues me a bit. This ordinary strong wood can't absorb or store spiritual energy. How did you manage to make it absorb and store spiritual energy? Is there some special cultivation method?" The woman looked at Wang curiously. Wang was a little uneasy under her gaze. "It's just a coincidence. There's no specific cultivation method." The woman was obviously unconvinced, but she wouldn't ask if the other party didn't want to talk about it. Now that the 7 major Eastern sects were in charge, everyone was still at peace, so she could only act in a peaceful manner. "Okay, how much do you have?" "I'll take them all." "What's the price?" Wang asked. "1 spirit stone for 10 pounds, the woman said. "I'm afraid that's not right. Your ordinary pine spirit wood is 1 spirit stone for 10 pounds. My wood is obviously much better than yours," Wang said. "The price I'm talking about is very fair. If you don't believe me, you can go to other shops and ask. Your strong spiritual wood is hard, so its weight naturally can't compare to ordinary spiritual wood. This piece alone weighs almost 300 kilograms. If you don't believe me, you can try it," the woman said. Wang weighed it casually. At the 5th level of key training, he didn't feel anything. But when he weighed the ordinary pine spiritual wood sold in the shop, he found that, as she said, the weight was much different. As the saying goes, shop around. "I can't just sell it to you based on your word alone," Wang said. "Then please, the price I'm giving you is very fair. While this strong spiritual wood is valuable and rare, it's not without alternatives. If it were more than this, I wouldn't be able to use it. It would be better to let someone else do it and save me the trouble," the woman said. As the saying goes, all businessmen are dishonest. Wang believed her words, but it wasn't as good as verifying them himself. He then left and headed to the next shop. The same words were said again, and this time the person who came out was also a weapon refiner, and his words were similar to the woman's just now. Wang did not ask the next shop owner, and returned to the original shop. After discussing with the woman, he prepared to go back to dismantle the house. By the afternoon, Wang had already dismantled his house completely. It was estimated that there were about tens of thousands of pounds of wood. Although Wang's house was not big, the wood boards were really too heavy, not comparable to ordinary spiritual wood. The shop woman was really shocked when she saw Wang take out so much wood from several storage rings. She thought that even if he had some, it would not be too much, but she did not expect it to be so much. After counting and weighing for a long time, the shop assistant finally finished the inventory. With nearly 7,000 spirit stones in hand, Wang finally did not feel the loss of using 999 contribution to upgrade. Instead, he felt he had found a business opportunity. If he traded contribution points for spirit stones, 999 contributions would only yield 999 spirit stones. However, upgrading the house and then selling the wood proved to be incredibly cost-effective. Only around 1,100 contributions were needed to upgrade a level 50 wooden house, which could be sold for around 7,000 spirit stones. Furthermore, if he carefully planned the wood used in building the house, adding more wood to the walls might yield even more value. He'd need to carefully calculate this and see if it was feasible. Perhaps this was a quick way to get rich. My name is Muxiu. If you have any more of this kind of spirit wood, come find me. Seeing how much spirit wood Wang could produce so quickly, the woman from before, convinced that he might still have some, introduced herself as a way to establish a relationship. Wang, thinking he'd find the same idea, agreed. Thinking he could quickly make a fortune using this method, he agreed. Okay, if there's more in the future, I'll definitely come back to you. The price will still be the same. Okay. The two happily decided. After leaving Heiji Market, Wang felt something was amiss. This woman's surname was Mu. Could she be from the Mulin sect? Looking back, he saw the Mulin sect's logo hanging above the shop. No wonder the shop assistants and no one else in the shop never mentioned their sect or family name. Mulin sect, so be it. At least dealing with a major sect wouldn't be so stingy. Wang returned with his spirit stones, calculating all the way. To upgrade a house to level 50 required about 1,100 contribution points, plus the 100 contribution points for level 49 and the final 999 contribution points for level 50. And what about strong wood? In a place like Wang's, it was easy to find. Even if he cut it all down, weren't there still plenty of mountains nearby? Strong wood was just ordinary wood, readily available, so the cost was essentially negligible. So, if you accumulate contributions and use this method to level up, you can exchange them for several times more spirit stones. 1,099 contributions can be exchanged for over 7,000 spirit stones, almost 7 times as much. With this method, with more spirit stones, other aspects of the family can also develop rapidly. However, accumulating contributions still requires time, which is quite annoying. Ultimately, it's a mutually beneficial process. The Wang family is currently short of money, so this method is the only way to exchange for cash. As for other things, they can consider them once everything is on track. Wang had previously considered building a house with ordinary spirit wood and upgrading it to level 50. He wondered what would happen, perhaps even yielding a powerful wood-attributed spirit wood. However, he didn't dare to try it right now. The family had many other financial needs. The spirit stones weren't enough to cover the 2 missing items in the training room, so they had to consider other buildings. Wang inspected the mountain gate and walked around it several times. He felt that the first priority was to complete the construction. He didn't want others to see such a dilapidated gate when they visited. This was something Wang understood well. The previous times I visited the Liu family's residence, it had seemed shabby and haphazard. But this time, the towering mountain gate, the various properties, the library, the training rooms, the plaza, and the main hall under construction, suddenly gave me the impression of a powerful force, a family of immortal cultivators, cultivators who stood above mortals. It was decided to repair the mountain gate first. Upon hearing Wang's decision, Wang Zimin and Wang Lin were naturally delighted. The mountain gate was the face of a family, and while building it was useless. Its greatest use was simply to preserve its reputation. Chapter 68 Rebuilding the Mountain Gate. However, completing the entire project in one go proved difficult. The original mountain gate had been in use for centuries before being destroyed by disciples from the upper Zhuanggu Valley. Rebuilding it now naturally had to resemble the original. Wang had originally envisioned a more magnificent design, but upon hearing the price, he gave up. He decided to keep it the same as before, or perhaps even a little worse. The 7,000 spirit stones he earned from selling the spirit wood, plus the 2,593 spirit stones he had saved from the family's previous land, totaled nearly 10,000 spirit stones, of which Wang gave Sun Xiaoxiao 500. These spirit stones included leftovers and some from the spirit stone condenser. Building the mountain gate alone would cost around 8,000 spirit stones. It turned out that the mountain gate was more than just a gate. For a cultivator, a mountain gate serves many other purposes, not just as a gate. The most important of these was the installation of a clan protection formation, serving as the centerpiece. Therefore, the dragon gate structure couldn't be arbitrary, and even more so, The materials. As the site for a clan protection formation, even though the Wang family didn't currently have one, it still required careful consideration. Secondly, it isolates spiritual energy. While clan protecting formations are generally designed for attack and defense, isolating spiritual energy is closely tied to the construction of the mountain gate itself. Remember, spiritual energy isn't evenly distributed. Some mountains are dense, while others are thin. Kingentropy Mountain, for example, is considered rich in spiritual energy, but this energy is also connected to the outside world. In other words, while the concentration varies from place to place, they are interconnected. The Dragon Gate's function is to isolate the outside world from the mountain's spiritual energy. This isolation isn't complete, as spiritual energy is something that cannot be completely isolated, and even cultivators struggle to fully understand it. If someone were to fully understand it, they would likely reach the true path. It simply prevents the spiritual energy generated within the mountain from escaping, while encouraging external spiritual energy to flow in. It's not a true isolation. Of course, this is just a figurative summary. There are certainly underlying mechanisms. Wang didn't want to know the specific details, he simply followed along, providing the funds. Wang Zimin was more experienced and attentive, having already gained some understanding. The two then went to the Liu family to inquire, only to discover that the nearby Fang family, with their inherited earth element spiritual roots, were perfectly suited to this task. Wang Zimin also had a preliminary understanding. Forging a mountain gate wasn't about refining a weapon, so it didn't require a weaponsmith. Instead, it required a craftsman. While this term might sound similar to immortal craftsman, it was a very important profession among cultivators. Craftsmen were generally cultivators of the earth, wood, or metal elements, specializing in crafting natural objects. This crafting was very crude, so the requirements for becoming a craftsman were low, and their numbers in the immortal world were no less rare than those of weaponsmiths. However, the role of craftsman was crucial. It could be said that without craftsmen, there would be no weaponsmiths, as craftsmen were the precursor to weaponsmithing. For example, common materials sold in the outside world, such as refined iron and spiritual wood, are neatly arranged, but these materials aren't naturally like this. Their original state was simply raw iron or wood, and they were all forged by craftsmen. Without craftsmen, there would be no weapon refiners. If you give a weapon refiner a piece of raw iron and ask them to work on it, they'll never produce a magical weapon. The Fang family, however, was renowned for producing craftsmen, but the Liu family wasn't particularly familiar with them. They'd commissioned them to build many of their own buildings, so they knew them a bit. Wang asked for their address, intending to visit and inquire about prices. Returning to the mountain gate, Wang considered bringing Wang Zi along. After all, Wang Zimin's cultivation wasn't as high as Wang Zi's, so bringing Wang Zi along would help boost their reputation. That afternoon, before they left their homes, they spotted a group from the Liu family approaching. Liu Zixing, concerned that the Wang family's current staff might be embarrassing if they visited other families, had sent someone to accompany them. Furthermore, the Liu family had previously interacted with them and knew some of their prices. The Fang family wasn't too far from either the Liu or Wang families. They were neighbors, but not as close as the Liu and Wang families. They still shared a common ground with the two families. However, upon their arrival, they discovered that the Fang family's business was incredibly prosperous. It had been shortly after the catastrophe, and all the clans were rebuilding their mountain gates. This left the Fang family, who already had few descendants, practically out-earning spirit stones every day. This also made them a fortune, as they were the only ones in the area specializing in this business. Seeking other clans further afield was clearly impractical. It took 2 days and several trips before they finally got in line and met the Fang family's head. The head, a rather elderly man, was naturally pleased to have business, and agreed with Wang to visit at a later date. Wang then discussed the costs with a young steward of the Fang family. These included the cost of materials like brown stone and a small amount of jade, as well as the cost of hiring labor, carving talismans, polishing, and setting up spiritual energy channels to reserve space for the clan's protective formation. The isolation barrier was the biggest expense, and Wang could only set up the simplest, cheapest barrier possible. The total cost was 7,900 spirit stones. This wasn't surprising to Wang, as he had chosen very basic and cheap items. His goal, of course, was to increase his family's building points. If he tried to complete the project all at once, He probably wouldn't gain many points, so for now, he just wanted a rough outline. A few days later, the Fang family members arrived and began construction. Of all things in the world, only stone can endure, remaining unchanged through the passage of time. In this spiritual world, the same is true for stone, whether it's in a place with thin spiritual energy or one with rich spiritual energy. Building the Dragon Gate wasn't a simple process, but these family members were clearly highly skilled. A man leading the Fang family met Wang. The group then searched Conjentropy Mountain, seeking a spot nourished by spiritual energy for the longest time, then excavating the stone from it to build the Dragon Gate. The others had their own things to do, so Wang followed them. Apparently confused as to why they were searching so specifically, he asked, "Are there any differences in the stones on this mountain?" Of course there are. Conjentropy Mountain is considered a mountain gate with rich spiritual energy, but the place is so large that it is obviously different in every place. The leading man explained. "Are you looking for stones with richer spiritual energy?" Wang asked. The leading man nodded. Stones are things that remain unchanged for millions of years, so the degree to which they absorb spiritual energy is naturally different. Conjentropy Mountain has rich spiritual energy. If you find the right place and dig down, you might even find spiritual stones. You can even dig up spiritual stones? Wang was surprised. He naturally knew that in addition to the spiritual stones condensed by cultivators, the outside world naturally also had places where spiritual stones were bred, such as spiritual stone veins. The man nodded again and laughed. Not only spiritual stones, but also things like 100-flower stones and void control stones are possible. These things are more valuable than spiritual stones. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Rebuilding the Mountain Gate. There are actually these things. I'll dig some myself someday and see if I can find anything good, Wang muttered. Don't, you cultivators, you don't understand. If you dig recklessly, you might destroy the foundation of Conjentropy Mountain. In the future, even spiritual energy might not be able to gather, and it will become just an ordinary mountain gate, the leading man advised. So that's how it is. So spiritual energy and these stones actually complement each other, one nurturing the other, one locking the other? Wang asked. Almost, but not entirely. Each mountain gate is different, and the situation is different. For example, the 5 spirit sects mountain gate was able to have such rich spiritual energy because tens of thousands of demon beast corpses were buried beneath the mountain range. The leading man looked down and chatted with Wang. Tens of thousands of demon beast corpses? Wang was puzzled. Yes, some of these demon beast corpses were high level. After their death, their spiritual energy still nurtured their bodies, buried underground. Over time, this place was formed. I used to be a craftsman in the 5 spirit sect, so I naturally know, the leading man said. Wang nodded repeatedly and continued to ask questions. Unconsciously, he learned a lot more. They had found a place, located at the foot of a cliff on the left side of Conjentropy Mountain. Above the cliff was an open area, and next to it was the orchard. Further inland was their current residence. This cliff is close to the bottom of the mountain. Is the spiritual energy in the stone here more abundant? Wang asked. The leading man nodded. This should have been an underground stone layer. I'm afraid the battle shaved off a piece, forming a cliff, the leading man said. Shaved? Wang looked up. The towering stone wall was neatly cut, as if it had been cut by someone. However, Wang Zimin said that the highest level of cultivation in the Wang family for hundreds of years was only the foundation establishment stage. A foundation establishment stage cultivator shouldn't have the ability to split mountains and break rocks to such an extent, right? Although the rocks here have been exposed for a long time, the spiritual energy hasn't dissipated. We're afraid of touching the spiritual veins in other places, so let's use the ones here. The leading man said, seeing Wang in a daze. Wang came back to his senses and nodded, and the group immediately took action. They first selected rocks and found a huge rock formation at the bottom of the cliff. The leading man took out a magic weapon and began measuring, preparing to dig, and then cut off the entire rock. The remaining 2 or 3 people placed the scattered large rocks one by one into the storage rings they had prepared in advance. Is there any particularity in choosing rocks? Wang picked up a piece at random. The spiritual energy on the stone was so weak that he couldn't sense the difference at all. Of course there is. The man picked a piece and placed it in front of Wang. This kind, without the protection of spiritual energy, has weathered and become brittle, unusable and unable to absorb spiritual energy in the future. With that, he squeezed the stone, causing it to crack. He then picked up another piece. This kind, with its greater spiritual energy content, is naturally very strong. Of course, cultivators like you who haven't studied this wouldn't be able to detect it. Wang nodded. He examined the stones, unable to detect any difference in spiritual energy. Perhaps only stones like spirit stones, which absorb spiritual energy to the extreme, could detect it. Several people dug out a whole block of rock, a thick slab as tall as 8 or 9 wangdas. They then laid it flat, and people everywhere pulled out various magical tools and artifacts to begin refining the massive stone. While it didn't look as complex as refining a weapon, just ordinary hammering and banging, it was too rough. But if Wang were to do it himself, he wouldn't be able to do it. A day passed, and it was still just a huge stone. By evening, the Fang family members were still at the cliff edge, working on it. Yes, the Fang family's business has been booming lately, and some of the disciples with advanced cultivation have practically given up on training and sleep, toiling away day and night. What could be more exciting than earning spirit stones? After all, if peace had continued in the years ahead, the Fang family could have accumulated considerable resources. After a few days, the outline of the Dragon Gate took shape, though some minor details still needed work. Another day later, the exterior was finalized, and the Fang family members began work on the embellishments and carving the patterns. It took over 10 days to complete the Dragon Gate. Then came the spiritual awakening, and Wang, as the clan leader, personally participated in the installation. Standing at the mountain gate, Wang gazed upon the towering Dragon Gate, feeling its imposing presence. This was exactly what he envisioned the mountain gate to be. Excitement washed over him, and he channeled his spiritual energy into it. Fine lines of carving began to fill the Dragon Gate, flowing like water, all the way around it until, in a recessed area below, a curtain of invisible light emerged. Spiritual energy suddenly surged through the mountain, and an invisible curtain of light enveloped the entire mountain. This Dragon Gate has already awakened. Over the long years to come, it will slowly absorb spiritual energy and become increasingly stronger, thus protecting your family. However, I still suggest that you quickly establish a protective formation. After all, this mountain gate can only block spiritual energy and won't have much impact on ordinary cultivators. The leading cultivator spoke to Wang. Wang naturally knew this, but the family was too poorly funded. Just building a simple Dragon Gate would require so many spirit stones, and a large protective formation would require the same. Money is spirit stones are contributions, and contributions are people. Ultimately, there are too few people. After speaking, the leader took out another token and handed it to Wang. This is the pattern for the entry and exit token. The incantation is up to you to determine. From now on, to enter and exit the mountain gate, you'll need to carry one daily. Simply have an ordinary weapon refiner forge one using fine iron according to this pattern. Wang agreed to all of the instructions. At this point, without the clan's protective formation in place, the entry and exit token was effectively useless. Since every cultivator could enter and exit at will, there was no rush regarding the token. Wang simply memorized it and stored it in his stored ring. Wang bid the group farewell and led them back up the mountain. Everyone looked out at the light curtain outside, tears welling in their eyes. Everything would be alright. With clan leader Wang here, the Wang family would only prosper. This was a firm belief firmly held in the hearts of the three men, unknowingly born from a certain time, and not simply because Wang had built a mountain gate. At night, Wang would secretly retreat to the newly built cabin and begin to check the system. After all, the mountain gate had cost 8,000 spirit stones to build, surely it would add a significant amount of clan size points. Family Scale Level 1, increases the cultivation speed of all family members by 1. Family Scale Level 2, increases the spiritual energy density of all family locations by 1. Family Scale Level 3, increases the comprehension of all family members by 1. Family points. 3,880, 5,000, Small Spiritual Spring plus 90 Dragon Gate plus 1,000 Stone Carving plus 120. Chapter 70 New Year. Wang only inspected the Dragon Gate and the stone carvings, leaving everything else untouched. Everything else remained the same. His own house had been demolished, and his points were gone, but he had added some other things. He had 3,880 points, which seemed to put him within striking distance of a level 4 clan. Currently, this level of clan size was second only to the clan contribution, as it was a universal tool needed for everything. However, the passive abilities within the clan size were undoubtedly the simplest and most effective. With 1 or 2 more waves of contribution, he could probably reach level 4. The speed of cultivation, the depth of spiritual power, and the level of comprehension were all improving. He wondered what kind of passive abilities level 4 would offer. He was looking forward to it, but he had no spirit stones. Furthermore, Wang had been thinking about the construction of the mountain gate these past few days. Putting aside the other 2 items for the training room, the most important thing now was to consider the clan protection formation. This was undoubtedly the most crucial aspect of any faction. Even with the simplest of these key condensation cultivators, they could hold off a foundation establishment cultivator, albeit only for a delay. But it's undoubtedly the simplest and most effective way to challenge a higher level opponent. In a world where strength reigns supreme, this is paramount. While peace has been restored in the East under the 7 Sects Alliance, the world of immortal cultivation has never experienced absolute and lasting peace. Every cultivator knows this. For cultivators, the primary purpose of cultivation is to outlive mortals. However, many seem to forget this. Take, for example, the previous war between Shangzhuang Valley and the 5 Spirit Sect, where countless cultivators perished, many of whom lived even shorter lives than mortals. Furthermore, independent cultivators are known for their ruthlessness, their murder and robbery a matter of course. Therefore, in the world of immortal cultivation, survival is paramount, before anything else can be desired. The sect protection formation is a means of preserving one's life, and a very effective one at that. Having made his decision, Wang went directly to Liu Zixing. After all, the Liu family now possessed a sect protection formation. He planned to inquire about the situation, at least to learn how many spirit stones were needed so he could prepare. Arriving at the Liu family's mountain gate, the guard didn't stop Wang this time, but instead gave him a rather hostile look. Wang ignored him and went straight to Liu Zixing. Upon questioning, he discovered that Liu Zixing himself hadn't participated and wasn't aware of the sect's protective formation. Wang then inquired with several of the Liu family members responsible for the matter 90,000 spirit stones. That was the cheapest price, and that was the same price the Liu family was currently using for the sect's protective formation. It was a shock to Wang. But upon reflection, something that required a higher level challenge wasn't cheap, so this price was reasonable. Wang didn't know what the Liu family had paid to gather 90,000 spirit stones. Perhaps it had completely sacrificed the cultivation resources of these members, but they had put it to use. Yes, they had gathered this life-saving item, this thing to protect the mountain gate. And even if he tried his best, he probably wouldn't be able to gather 90,000 spirit stones. He would have to take his time. He had just found a way to exchange contributions for 7 times the spirit stones, but it would clearly take a long time to accumulate the full 90,000. Returning to the mountain gate, Wang saw the 7 children, including Qin Yi, diligently cultivating. While life-saving aids were important, Wang pondered carefully, and realized that cultivation and strength were paramount. Perhaps what he needed to do was deter others from attacking the mountain gate, rather than pursuing a protective formation that would only allow him to retreat into retreat. Wang fell asleep, his thoughts still swirling. Qin Yi had been diligently cultivating these days, unknowingly reaching the 3rd level of key training. Meanwhile, his senior brother, Wang Xiaozhen, was still at the 1st level. Wang felt that this inherited power was truly miraculous. The 3rd level of key training was significantly faster than his own previous cultivation speed. He, after all, possessed mid-grade spiritual roots, and had only reached the 3rd level at the age of 13. Wang Lin, with low-grade spiritual roots, had only reached the 4th level at around 20. Qin Yi, though only 14, had only been cultivating for a short time, yet he had already reached the 3rd level. This spoke volumes about the power of this inheritance. While the mountain gate's passive abilities offered some bonuses, Wang knew it couldn't possibly allow for such a terrifying cultivation speed. It seemed like he had truly found a treasure when he took Qin Yi up the mountain. Of the remaining few, Wang, the fastest cultivator, remained the same, still stuck at the 1st level of key training. As for the other 3, Wang Lin showed signs of breaking through to the 6th level, but it still took time. During this time, He intensified his training, and his two disciples were no longer interested in teaching him. Wang Zimin, needless to say, simply took on the responsibility himself. After all, for a cultivator, cultivation was paramount, and there was nothing wrong with Wang Lin's diligent cultivation. It was now approaching the end of the year. Wang De had accumulated several hundred contribution points, but it was still not enough to clear the spirit-strong wooden house once. He tried other methods, but firstly, he didn't have the contribution to experiment with, and secondly, he had nothing to experiment with. In the family these days, even a single spirit stone was extremely precious. For those below the mountain, life continued as usual. While it wasn't as bustling as below, everyone continued their daily cultivation as usual. Several children, all taken care of by Wang Zimin, had a few days off to visit their families in the mortal world. They also went back to visit their own relatives in the mortal world. Wang Zi, originally from the mortal world, naturally had many relatives there. She had prepared many things early and left a mountain. Wang Zimin, not originally from the mortal world, had an uncle without spiritual roots who lived in Congentropi County. Only Wang Lin and Wang De remained at the mountain gate. Wang Lin, on the verge of a breakthrough, wanted to seize this opportunity, so he locked himself in his room and diligently cultivated. Wang De, left alone on the mountain, had nothing to do, so he practiced daily, patrolling the area and observing the bustle of the mortal world from afar. By the time they returned, it was already the 15th day of the first lunar month, and Wang Lin had emerged from his retreat. He had reached the 6th level of key training, a pace that impressed Wang De. This was undoubtedly the fastest among the group. Wang De, possessing mid-grade spiritual roots and living on a higher floor, naturally cultivated faster. But Wang Lin, on the other hand, was more driven by his own efforts and possessed the mindset to cultivate. While Wang Zi was diligent, he wasn't as hard-working as Wang Lin. Wang Zimin and his team were busy taking care of the mountain gate and the disciples, completely uninterested in cultivation. Despite Wang De's repeated attempts to persuade him, he remained unmoved, so he simply let him be. After the 5th level of key training, things weren't as easy as before. This was evident in the fact that Wang De, who had already reached the 6th level, showed no signs of a breakthrough. It took Wang Zi many years to advance from the 6th to the 7th level. On the mountain, everyone was busy cultivating, except for Wang Zimin, who approached Wang De to discuss several important matters for the new year. Chapter 71 Test. Wang Zimin recounted several matters, all routine family matters in previous years. The current manpower shortage was likely a problem. Wang De listened intently, immediately pinpointing the most important one, recruiting new disciples to the mountain. This was something Wang De had long yearned for, and when Wang Zimin mentioned it, he immediately prioritized it. However, this wasn't a simple matter. Due to the large number of villages at the foot of the mountain, young disciples had traditionally traveled there after the Lunar New Year, carrying test stones for testing. Now, with insufficient manpower on the mountain, and mortals lacking spiritual power to utilize the test stones, this suddenly became the most challenging task. With so many villages at the foot of the mountain, recruiting disciples from dozens of groups at the beginning of the year would typically take months, followed by subsequent retesting, and finally admission to the mountain sect mid-year. Now, with only the 4 of them, those children clearly weren't capable of doing anything, and requiring supervision was a significant challenge. Wang De pondered this for a long time, realizing that the 4 of them, including Qin Yi, could also be counted. Although Qin Yi was also a new disciple, he was 14 years old, making him the same age as Wang De and considered an adult. As for traveling to every village, it was obviously a waste of time. Furthermore, if they continued traveling this way, the 4 of them wouldn't be able to cultivate. It was a complete waste of time. Wang De then went to Congentropi County with Wang Zimin. After going through the procedures of previous years and pondering them, he finally made a decision. First, they would cancel the traditional practice of testing children over 3 years old. In previous years, all disciples aged 3 and over could be tested. Since 6 would be a full 3 years, each child could be tested 3 times, preventing any accidents or discrepancies with the test stones. Wang De simply abolished this practice. Now that there were only 4 people at the mountain gate, how could they conduct the tests? Secondly, the mountain disciples used to travel to each village. Firstly, everyone could fly, making travel to each village hassle-free, and secondly, it wouldn't interfere with mortals. Now there was no other way. Traveling to every village was simply unrealistic, Wang took a map and drew more than 10 circles, marking a village in the middle. People from other villages with children of appropriate age were required to go to designated villages and wait for testing. Wang's reasoning stemmed from his desire to leverage the county government's resources to address staff shortages. Wang too, receiving Wang's order, set out to carry out the task, accompanied by Wang, as he still needed to lead the effort. Wang Zimin, taking the spirit stones Wang had given him, returned to the mountains to prepare. Upon returning, Wang Lin handed the spirit stones to Wang Lin, who then went to Heiji Market to purchase testing stones. This time, Wang wasn't going to use small test stones, but large ones. Larger stones, after all, offer less error, and are more convenient for testing. Wang Zi and Qin Yu also descended the mountain to rejoin Wang. With Wang Zimin alone on the mountain, Wang felt more at ease leaving the children in his care. When Wang Zi and Qin Yu arrived, Wang instructed them to prepare themselves, and the county government would dispatch personnel to assist them, including registration and maintaining public order. After a day of waiting at the county government, Wang Lin finally purchased the 4 large test stones. It would take time for the notice from the county government to reach each village, so the 4 of them were ready to go. We'll try to complete the testing within a month this time. Don't delay too long. The 3 nodded and split up, each flying directly to their respective villages. Yamen runners, constables, and others had arrived early, awaiting the arrival of the Immortal Master. Wang too, Wang and others also dispersed to their respective villages to join the Immortal Masters. When Wang arrived, the site was already prepared, so he immediately set down the large test stone and began infusing it with spiritual energy, which took a whole day. Unlike smaller stones, large test stones offer less error and faster testing, but they require spiritual stones to activate, so Wang had to be generous. The next day, he joined the village's young men and the Yamen runners and constables to wait in advance. On the first day, Wang planned to test approximately 5 surrounding villages. This area would take about 5 or 6 days to complete, and with over 10 areas in total, he should be able to complete the testing within a month, barring any unexpected events. This village is the center of the area, but each village is far from the others, and walking distances can take time. Wang had already made preparations. The first to be tested were from the neighboring village. They arrived early in the morning, accompanied by their parents, mostly mothers, with a group of children, numbering at least 20 or 30. This excluded children aged 4 and 5, but only 6. Wang too had also arrived at this time. As an immortal master, Wang didn't know how to manage mortals, so he took over. The children began to line up. Such a grand event was a source of great anticipation, so naturally, no one disrupted the process, everyone behaved well. However, some, like Qin Yi, didn't want their children to practice cultivation or had other things to do, so some were left out. This was necessary. As for those who didn't want their children to practice cultivation, each had their own reasons. Some felt that cultivation was too dangerous and preferred the stability of mortal life, while others felt that cultivation was too ethereal and unrealistic, preferring farming instead. There were all sorts of opinions, but most still hoped their children would cultivate. The test began. After Wang Tu finished his lecture, he wasted no time and sat aside, taking notes himself. It was unavoidable. Most of the Yamen runners were illiterate. Several legal advisors and county officials had already gone to the other 3 locations, so he took matters into his own hands. Wang stood beside the testing stone, controlling it and replenishing it with spiritual energy. The first child came forward, his hands still damp, clearly freshly washed. "Focus, don't be nervous." Wang casually consoled him. 3 minutes later. "No spiritual roots, next." The second child came forward. 3 minutes later. "No spiritual roots, next." 29 people in a row, almost an hour and a half, and not a single child with spiritual roots was found. The neighboring village was completely wiped out. Not a single one with spiritual roots. The parents, their faces filled with disappointment, gathered together. The old man leading the group, evidently the village chief, also wore a gloomy expression as he led his group back in disappointment. The clearing suddenly fell silent again, as everyone waited for the second village to arrive. Another half-hour passed before the huge crowd finally arrived from the ridge of the field. This village was farther away, so the arrival time was a little different. Wang looked and saw that there were quite a few people in the village, Probably about 50 children. Chapter 72 Test. Timing Village Chief Wang and his fellow villagers greet the immortal master. The leader, a gentle and refined middle-aged man, bowed. Wang casually waved, indicating no further formalities were necessary. He turned to Wang and bowed again. Timing Village. No need for that. Hurry and take the test, Wang said, noticing Wang's apparent anxiety. Then the Timing Village formed up again and began the test. Wang glanced over and saw that the first person to come up was the son of the village chief, Wang. The two exchanged words of encouragement. As the child climbed up, Wang casually offered a soothing reassurance. The child placed his hand directly on the testing stone. Inferior fire-type spiritual roots. Feeling relieved at finally having a child with spiritual roots, Wang turned to Wang 2. Wang 2 held up a booklet. Wang K. The tests from last year and the year before also showed inferior fire-type spiritual roots. Wang said, record this, and then looked back at the child. Go back and wait for news. Someone from the county will come to pick you up when you get to the mountain. Wang hurriedly pulled his son to his knees, bowing before Wang and offering words of thanks. Wang politely said something and then called for the next person. Wang took his son aside. As the village chief, he naturally had to wait until all the village children had completed the tests before taking them away. No spiritual roots, next one. More than 20 people passed by, and except for Wang K at the beginning, no one had any spiritual roots. Wang remained undeterred and continued to call. Next one. Just then, a middle-aged woman came up, pulling a little boy with her. You go down, and let him come up. Wang pointed at the boy. The middle-aged woman glanced at the child, offering a few words of comfort, then began to leave. The boy then stepped forward, his hand pressing on the test stone. Mid-grade earth spiritual roots. Wang was also somewhat surprised. Mid-grade spiritual roots were something that could only be found by chance, and now, apart from himself, there was no one else in this mountain gate with a mid-grade spiritual root. Now, Wang had discovered a mid-grade spiritual root. How could he not be surprised? The mere fact that a mid-grade spiritual root could appear in the mortal world was both strange and comforting to Wang. He was about to praise the little boy when the little girl and her father, standing behind them, began to whisper. Dad, this Niuzu actually has a mid-grade spiritual root. The little girl looked at her father with obvious envy. The father simply frowned and consoled his daughter. It's okay. It doesn't matter if you don't have talent. You can still farm at home. Wang was a cultivator after all, so even though their voices were low, he could still pick them up. If it were ordinary conversation, he wouldn't have listened. But he had clearly heard the little girl behind him call the boy being tested Niuzu. Wang, alert, asked the little boy in front of him. What's your name? The little boy, a little nervous, turned to look at the middle-aged woman behind him, then back at Wang, and whispered. My name is Wang Zhu. Wang Zhu, Wang Zhu, Wang repeated silently twice before asking. Do you have cattle? The child was now somewhat bewildered. He turned to look at the woman behind him, then back. We don't. Oh. Wang asked. Looking at the middle-aged woman behind him. What's his name? The middle-aged woman, a thoughtful person, didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, pulled the little boy along, and knelt down. Master Immortal, this is what I mean. I'm a member of the Wang family. My name is Wang Alien, but this child's surname isn't Wang, but Niu. I was originally married to someone from another village, but my husband died of illness. He has no parents or siblings, so I returned to my parents' home with my child to live as a widow. Wang glanced at Wang too, who shook his head. There's no record of that in the past 2 years. I hadn't returned to my parents' home at that time, so naturally, he didn't take the test, Wang Alien explained hastily. Wang then glanced at the village chief, Wang, who stepped forward and also knelt. Master Immortal, she is indeed a woman from my Timing village. She married someone from another village and just returned last month, saying that her husband had died. Wang nodded, thinking. There were few people in the mountains at this time. If the matter was really as they said, it would be fine to confess. After all, her mother was a member of the Wang family. At least she was better than Qin Yi. Of course, it didn't mean that Qin Yi was a bad person. When the woman saw Wang talking, her eyes widened and she kowtowed repeatedly. Master Immortal, please accept him. Master Immortal, please accept him. Master Immortal, please accept him. Her head was a little bruised, and Wang just used his spiritual power to help her up, but he didn't say a word. At this time, Wang also kowtowed to Wang. This Wang alien is originally from our Timing village. Her family was honest and well-behaved within the village, but she later married outside. Now that her husband has passed away, her child has taken her mother's surname, making her a member of the Wang family. Master, please accept her. I can't decide right now. Just go back and wait for news. If we recruit her, the county government will send someone. Wang, unwilling to waste time, simply had Wang write it down before continuing. Honestly, he was eager to recruit someone with mid-grade spiritual roots, but he couldn't agree to it out of hand. Just like when he recruited Qin Yi, he at least needed to investigate the individual's background. Even if they didn't have the surname Wang, they would need to be thoroughly investigated. Otherwise, they wouldn't be testing their spiritual roots so soon after the Lunar New Year. Of course, those with spiritual roots would still need to be examined during this period. But this made things easier. Since they were all from the village, it would be easy to reveal their true intentions if they were to cause trouble. The others withdrew and the testing resumed. Unsurprisingly, apart from these two individuals, there were no other people with spiritual roots in Timing village. Wang wasn't discouraged. After all, even though they were descendants of the Wang family, spiritual roots were rare among mortals, passed down through generations. By the time they finished testing this group, it was already midday. Knowing that 3 more villages needed testing today, Wang didn't rest and dragged everyone on. The third village wasn't very populous, and after the tests, no one showed any spiritual roots. However, after the tests were completed, Wang reminded Wang that a child in the village had been found to have mixed spiritual roots once, but not the other time. Not wanting to miss out on a child who might have spiritual roots, Wang summoned the child and repeated the test, finding no spiritual roots. Wang then instructed Wang to record the results and have him test again next year. After all, the world of immortal cultivation is full of strange things, and some spiritual roots might be unexpected. This large testing stone was much more accurate than a smaller one. After testing the 5 villages, it was already evening. While Wang didn't need to rest, the others, being mortals, naturally needed to rest. At the end of the day, only 2 people were found to have spiritual roots, and one of them was not surnamed Wang. Wang felt very disappointed. The next day, he went to 5 villages again, testing them from morning till night. Only one little girl had a miscellaneous spiritual root, which made the day worthwhile. On the 3rd day, there was no one, and the same was true on the 4th. On the last day, the last 7 villages in the area came together, testing from before dawn until late at night, when the last person was finally tested. Unfortunately, on this last day, no one was found to have spiritual roots. After 5 days, there were only 3 people. Early on the 6th day, Wang gathered the children in his village to be tested as well. Then, at dawn, he took the test stone to the next village. As for the assisting Yamen runners, they got up early and set off to the second area. Chapter 73 Child Labor. After a full 29 days, thanks to Wang's frantic efforts and the cooperation of all the mortal members of the Wang family, this year's tests were finally completed. The 4 gathered in the county capital. This year's tests were largely similar to those of the previous 2 years, with only 3 who hadn't tested positive for spiritual roots in previous years finding them. Including those tested in previous years, there were a total of 28 6-year-olds. This was generally considered standard, similar to previous year's admissions. As for the 7 on the mountain, they had been admitted last year, but the remaining 7 had been unable to go up the mountain due to circumstances. This year's 29 was considered normal. Although there was a month's delay, with 29 new disciples, if all of them were to infuse spiritual energy into their bodies and begin cultivation, their daily contributions would increase significantly. Contributions, in turn, represented resources. While Wang longed to recruit them into the mountain now, he also needed to prepare everything. Furthermore, the usual practice was to recruit students mid-year, with the remaining time for individual review to prevent any unforeseen circumstances. Wang hadn't wanted to review the records, but the Wang family was so large, and there had been incidents in the past, so Wang had to review them one by one. However, everything had to be returned to the mountain first. After such a long absence, it was time to rest for a few days and consolidate his realm. Wang Zimin was clearly eager to see Wang and the other 3 return. He was a restless person, but since Wang De wouldn't let him leave, he had no choice but to watch over the 7 children. They had all entered a state of cultivation, only occasionally asking questions. Naturally, he had nothing to do, and had more time to cultivate. Wang De saw that he had indeed reached the 6th level of key training, proving his efforts had paid off. Leaving him to watch over them also gave Wang Zimin some time to cultivate properly. His breakthrough was a result of Wang De's persuasion. Has anything happened at the mountain gate recently? Wang De and the others hadn't been back for so long, so they naturally had to ask Wang Zimin. Nothing serious, but there was a major incident in the outside world, Wang Zimin said. Wang De glanced at him, expressing his inquiries. Recently, someone from the 7 Great Sects Alliance has achieved a breakthrough, making him the 2nd giant-level cultivator in the East, Wang Zimin said. The East's growing strength is a good thing, Wang De said. That's nothing compared to the 5 Spirit Sect and Shangzonggu Sect. Each sect boasted over a dozen giant-level cultivators, and I've heard there were even Yuanying-level veterans. Now, the East only has 2 giant-level cultivators, and they've only recently reached the level. I'm afraid they can't hold their own against the encroachment from other regions. Wang Zimin said. Wang De, hearing Wang Zimin's words today, realized that the East had previously had Yuanying-level cultivators. Now, with only 2 giant cultivators, it was truly dangerous. However, Wang De was curious why the Xianayan sect and the northern sects weren't attacking the East now. Could there be something else going on? After 2 days of rest, the 5 gathered to discuss. The mountain was deserted. And Wang De already considered Qin Yi one of the others. After all, he was only 14 years old. In fact, he should have been 15 after the Lunar New Year. Moreover, he carried a legacy and had already reached the 3rd level of key training, making him a capable person. At most, there were only 5 of them, with 7 children outside. 29 of them would be too much to teach even if they were on the mountain alone, and they were so young that they would be difficult to supervise. A protective formation would provide a safety concern. After all, if everyone had to enter and exit through the mountain gate, keeping an eye on them would be much easier. Wang De was torn about the protective formation. If more people came up, he would earn more contributions, and the formation could be built faster. But if more people came up, it would be difficult to manage, and the protective formation would be needed. It was a conflicting proposition. Well, people were the priority. A temporary contribution shouldn't lead to a decrease in numbers. That would be a loss. Everyone may be hard-working from now on, but for the sake of the family and yourselves, believe me, this time spent cultivating will be returned to you in another form in the future. Everyone responded in unison, each brimming with confidence, not only because of the changes at the mountain gate, but also because of the clan leader's innate maturity. Wang De began assigning tasks. Qin Yi would be stationed in Kingentropy County every day, responsible for testing the 4- and 5-year-old children. However, this testing would take time to complete, so Wang De placed a large testing stone in Kingentropy County, with Qin Yi guarding it. Those who needed testing would naturally have to come to the county itself. However, this would take more than a short period of time, requiring Qin Yi to be in charge for a long time. For daily cultivation, Wang De provided spirit stones and elixirs, always with extra supplies, as practicing outside the mountain gate was impossible. Qin Yi nodded. Being able to cultivate was already a great achievement, and even if it delayed him for a year, he was willing. However, Wang De also allowed him to return to the mountain to find him if he had any questions. Furthermore, he was not allowed to make decisions on his own and had to report to him when encountering any unexpected situations. He could also come to the mountain to find him if he encountered any problems with his cultivation. Because this was not something that could be accomplished in a short period of time, Wang De also reminded him that his cultivation was also crucial. Wang Zimin, Wang Lin, and Wang Zi were to investigate the family backgrounds of the 29 children. This was the most important and reliable aspect of a family's children. As a powerful force in a mountain sect, especially one as fallen as the Wang family, Wang De knew that many were watching them from the shadows. Normally, the Liu and Wang families held a special relationship, so ordinary cultivators wouldn't dare confront them directly. However, what went on behind the scenes was much harder to guard against. Recruiting new disciples at the foot of the mountain was a potential opportunity. Therefore, Wang De didn't want to break this rule. While this would take time, it wouldn't be long. As for their return, Wang De would naturally make other arrangements. Due to a shortage of manpower, Wang De also brought along Wang Ye and another 8-year-old child. They were already 7 when they entered the mountain, so after the Lunar New Year, they should be 8. Actually, they weren't quite 8, but at least they were in better shape than the other 5. Wang De gathered them together. You are now considered cultivators. You have achieved cultivation, even if you're only at the first level of key training. You've almost mastered the basic techniques. It's time to assign you tasks. Wang Ye and the slightly older child stood at attention. They naturally understood that cultivation required tasks. As for the other 5, some understood, while others were more naive. Wang Ye, come out. Wang Ye immediately stepped forward. Take these 3 with you. Go to the mountain to chop down trees every day. 5 large trees a day. You can only go back to the mountain to cultivate on your own once you've completed your task. I'll be checking everything, so don't be lazy. Wang Ye responded. What kind of trees do you want to chop down? I'll take you there later and give you the rules and regulations, Wang De replied. Then he looked at the remaining 3. Wang Tao, you 3 will be responsible for moving rocks from the side of the mountain, 100 pounds a day, down to the courtyard below where you practiced breathing exercises. Yes, the 3 boys said in unison. You 3 wait here. I'll take them to set the rules for felling trees. With that, Wang De led the 4 men up the mountain next to Wang. Ah, we're coming up this mountain to cut trees? Wang Ye asked in surprise as Wang De soared directly onto the adjacent peak. This is your mission, and it's also a test of your mental fortitude, understand? Wang De mentally considered that if we were on Conjentropy Mountain, you'd still have to chop trees. I could easily clear a whole swath by myself. And while there were many trees on their own mountain, they obviously couldn't just chop them down indiscriminately. Yes, the other 3 responded immediately. Wang De began to lay out the rules for felling trees, primarily to build houses for the new disciples. 29 people was no small number. Those living at the foot of the mountain, those living up there, even if they were all wooden houses, needed wood, right? See? This is the tree. The others don't count. Wang De demonstrated one by one. Wang Ye stepped forward first, and with one spell, only a faint mark remained at the tree's base. How do we cut it down? We don't even. This is a test for you. If you can't even cut down a tree, how can you deal with other cultivators? You must know that you are cultivators now, not mortals, Wang De said seriously. But we're only at the first level of key training, and I'm only 6. Another girl among the 4 also imitated Wang Ye's words. After the new year, you'll be 7 years old. Besides, even at the first level of key training, you're still a cultivator. Since you don't practice magic seriously, of course you'll find it difficult now. That's why I've assigned you this task. Treat these trees as your training objects. After you chop them down each day, you have to transport them back. You've all learned the art of controlling objects, right? The 4 of you will cast a spell together and find a way to transport them back to the courtyard where you practiced breathing exercises before. Wang De was serious again. Seeing the other 3 looking dejected, Wang Ye perked up. Trial, okay? We'll definitely be able to complete it. Chapter 74 Construction. Well, that's a good spirit. It's the spirit a cultivator of my generation should possess. Remember, from now on, you need to chop down trees before returning to practice. Today won't count. You can get used to it here first, and tomorrow will count. Wang De finished his words and handed her another talisman. This is a sound transmission talisman. It has a short range. If you encounter any problems, inject spiritual energy into it and I can transmit it. If you can't, crush it and I'll be able to sense it. Wang Ye accepted it and responded. Wang De then flew away. Don't leave the mountain gate at night. Try it and bring them back. This place was not far from Conjentropy, with 2 peaks connected. If anything happened, Wang De would be able to sense it. After returning, Wang De took the other 3 boys to the foot of the side peak. This was where the Fang family members had quarried stones for the construction of Longmen. Above was a cliff, and to the side was an orchard. Wang De began to teach them how to distinguish between stones with faint spiritual energy and those without. After many attempts, Wang De finally found a method to distinguish them, hardness. Although this method had its limitations, it could roughly distinguish the items. Given the children's comprehension skills, Wang De had to explain it 3 or 4 times before they learned it. Pick the big ones, the rest won't count, understand? Wang De began to make arrangements. You have to move 100 kilograms every day. I'll check. Yes, the three boys answered immediately and loudly. Remember to move a little further out, don't hollow out the cliff. Today doesn't count, start tomorrow, Wang said. So when should we move? Wang Xiaozhen asked. Let's start with 2 months. Wang said. The three began experimenting, and Wang flew away again. Infrastructure work began to develop vigorously. This time, Wang only needed to build housing for the newly recruited disciples and a training ground. As for building the clan to level 4 and unlocking the 4th passive skill, these mundane structures obviously wouldn't add much points. He also needed to lay out the general outlines of conjentropy and prepare for the future. This was a massive project, not something that could be completed in a short time or even a year. But if he didn't plan now, as the number of people in the mountain gate increased, it would become increasingly difficult. After soaring into the air, Wang began to wander through each area, carefully surveying it. His last visit to the Liu family had provided him with a rough outline of the layout, but Wang wanted a better layout, and not just for Conjentropy Mountain. First, there was a large area at the foot of the mountain, now overgrown with weeds, with only a single courtyard standing alone. Wang had decided to divide this area into residences and training areas for the newest members, making it the focus of this development. Beyond that, there was a training room nearby, already built in advance. As the family's members grew in number, it wouldn't be left idle. Previously, with so few members, there wasn't a specific system in place, but a system would definitely be established in the future. The rest was the martial arts training ground, where Wang and his family currently lived. This large area had originally been the family's training ground, but after it was destroyed, Wang and his family built their own house there, leaving a vast expanse of vacant land. Wang's idea was to demolish the entire building. As before, those with seniority in the family would find a place in the mountain to build their own courtyards, while those without would live in townhouses, which Wang called collective dormitories. The dormitories are divided into 3 waves. The first is at the foot of the mountain, originally housing the lowest-ranking members of the clan. The second is located mid-mountain, now overgrown with the weeds. Finally, there's the area on the mountain between the martial arts training ground and the training room. Higher-level members receive higher accommodations, but building 3 waves is inherently difficult, so the lowest wave can only be constructed first. Wang's plan for the first half of the year is to complete the lowest wave of dormitories and then the martial arts training ground. With more members, they need to practice magic and spar, and without a training ground, they won't be able to survive. Practicing in the woods every day will eventually strip Conjentropy Mountain bare of trees. Unfortunately, these are just ordinary buildings, and they don't add much to clan size points, but any extra points count, and adding more will make it easier to reach level 4. With the materials solved, the next issue is construction. They had originally built the houses on the mountain themselves, but since Wang was alone on the mountain this time, he would have to hire mortals to do the work. Wang could certainly handle this, but even if he asked the prince's children to come up the mountain, it would still cost money. The most painful thing in the world of immortal cultivation is exchanging spirit stones for mortal silver. But Wang had no other choice but to ask mortals for help. After all, the Wang family wasn't like the Liu family, with their numerous adult children, so they could build the structure themselves. The next day, a large group of children left for their mission. Wang sent a message to Qin Yi, asking Wang to come up the mountain. Wang and Wang began to discuss their construction plan. Wang took note and went back to work on it. While the exchange rate for spirit stones was high, it was still painful enough to make Wang's heart ache. The townhouses, plus the training ground, would take at least 6 months to complete. While the houses were fine, the training ground presented some challenges. For one thing, ordinary mortals didn't have the necessary strength, and cutting stone was also a relatively complex task. This time, Wang planned to build the training ground himself, rather than hiring the Fang family's children. The reason was simple: he was out of spirit stones. He was still accumulating contributions. During this time, several people had gone down the mountain to test their disciples, and the contributions were too few. Wang Zimin and the other children on the mountain only contributed a small amount each day, resulting in him still unable to build a house of strong spirit wood. Unlike the Dragon Gate, the Dragon Gate served a special purpose and naturally required a hasty approach. But the martial arts arena, to put it mildly, was just a slightly larger square. Wang was confident he could handle it. However, The task fell solely to Wang, while the others had gone down the mountain to work. A day later, Wang Tu and a group of mortal artisans returned to the mountain. These, naturally, were all members of the Wang family. Knowing they were coming to the mountain to work, they all rushed to the plate. However, the construction was not something that could be completed quickly, so Wang naturally had to explain it clearly to them. The group consisted of over 20 strong men, but to the cultivators, they were clearly just mortals. After agreeing on the wages, Wang began to explain his plans. The townhouses below are in 3 rows, with 10 houses in each row and a yard. The requirements are also very simple, just enough to be livable. No decoration or carving is needed, and the windows are all open. It just needs to look good. The materials are also the simplest, strong wooden boards. Why do people who practice cultivation need to live so comfortably, right? The group also gathered together and discussed for a long time. Although it is simple, it is not an easy project. The next day, the group took out their tools and started working in a hurry. Wang was not idle either. It was estimated that it would not be enough to rely on the girls to chop trees, so he transported a batch of trees over. As for the processing, leave it to them. I believe that the rest can be chopped by the 4 children. I don't know what to say, so I wish everyone a happy new year. Chapter 75 Construction. After the events here began, Wang went back upstairs and demolished several rooms, sending down all the usable wood. He felt a pang of pain during the demolition. He had spent a considerable amount of contributions, but until he reached level 50, the wood would remain just wood, and the contributions would not be returned. Based on the rough outline of the original ruins, Wang sketched out the outline of the martial arts arena and began planning. The original martial arts arena was actually quite large. One side was where the disciples practiced magic, while the other half had many steps and a platform in the middle, usually used for sparring. So, with 2 halves, the area for practicing magic was also large, but thankfully, without the buildings above, all that was needed was to lay stone slabs on the ground, level the area, and then separate it into sections. As for the arena, a large amount of stone was needed. The original ruins were still usable, but they needed to be processed. These things should be something that even mortals could accomplish. After Wang had his mind made up, he briefly attended to other matters, such as collecting the spiritual spring, the spiritual stone refining device, and a visit to the orchard. These tasks, originally handled by Wang Zimin, now fell to Wang. Construction work at the foot of the mountain had begun. Wang and her 3 companions, though still young, were cultivators, possessing spiritual power and knowledge of magic. 5 large trees were moved to the foot of the mountain every day, as promised. The same was true for Wang Xiaozhen. 3 children, carrying stones, were almost as effective as 3 adults, not to mention their ability to fly, saving effort with their object-controlling skills. Working closely together, the 3 parties began the infrastructure construction work in full swing. Wang, acting as a go-between, filled in when one side was short of manpower. When there was a shortage of wood, he cut trees. When there was insufficient stone, he moved stones. He was also busy with other miscellaneous tasks. Wang finally understood Wang Zimin's hard work. Fortunately, hard work paid off, and the first row of houses was finally completed in just over 10 days. Although it was crude, just 4 walls and a roof, the walls were reinforced and functioned well, as did the roof. The courtyard was only a rough outline, and Wang didn't intend to waste time. He waited for the disciples to come up the mountain and let them find and fix the fence themselves. It would be a test. Construction began on the second row of houses. Wang toiled day after day, leaving him with virtually no free time for cultivation. But it was all worth it. To contribute more, to grow the family, he would surely make up for the time he had spent cultivating in the future. A month passed in a flurry, but the townhouses were clearly not yet finished. Another half-month was added before they were hurriedly finished. Wang personally inspected it. It still looked like a house, so that was all. For that month and a half, the 7 children were incredibly busy, despite their young age and limited energy. But they had clearly been influenced by the work. Things they hadn't been able to move a few days ago were now becoming more adept, becoming more and more skilled. Wang was naturally strong. In the first few days, she couldn't chop down more than 5 large trees from morning till night. But after a few days, she not only made up for the losses of the previous few days, but also had time to practice every day. Wang naturally didn't want to let them sit idle, and assigned them the daily task of helping the three of them move stones. The craftsman saw that these children looked like children, but they were like 7 adults, flying around all day, with more strength than adults. They didn't know the energy-saving power of the object control technique. Of course, after a month and a half of work, Wang was generous and rewarded each of them with 3 Ningxin pills. These pills were no ordinary elixirs, and even sold outside for 5 spirit stones each. So Wang was generous, considering the family finances were very tight. As for the mortal craftsman, Wang too would naturally provide them with silver. Preparations for the martial arts arena began in full swing. Wang drew a simple map and explained his plan to them. The only thing to do now is to build the foundation below. As for the things above, most of them need to be purchased separately, so there is no rush. After more than a month, they have moved a lot of stones, and the craftsmen have started to work, grinding, cutting. The basic construction work has begun in full swing. The martial arts field has not been completed yet, but Wang Zimin and the other 2 have returned to the mountain. In more than a month, they have already got a general idea of the situation of the 28 children. Wang asked about the situation. Most of the children are fine, but there are only a few who have some questions about their background. Wang asked Wang Lin and Wang Zi to supervise the work, and he followed Wang Zimin to place alone. There are only 3 people going down the mountain this time, and there are some questions about their background. There is a child named Wang Ying. Although his father's surname is Wang, he is not from the same family. What do you mean? Wang asked. Although his father's surname is Wang, he's not from our Congentrop Wang family. He's from the neighboring Fenglin city. 3 years ago, he learned his daughter possessed spiritual roots, but they were of inferior quality. No other sect would accept her. Since his family didn't have any cultivation lineage, he spent some money, bribed connections, and came to Congentrop, disguising himself as a member of the Congentrop Wang family. Wang Zimin said. What about Fenglin city? Have they investigated? Wang asked. Wang too sent someone there. This person only has inferior spiritual roots, which isn't a big deal. If they simply couldn't cultivate, it wouldn't matter if they accepted him or not, but we'd worry about someone with ulterior motives, Wang Zimin said. Wang nodded. There's another person with the same situation as Qin Yi, but his father fled from southern Yizhao and was taken in as a son by a bachelor in Songbei village. Later, the bachelor died, and the man remarried and had children. Wang Zimin said. How are her spiritual roots? Wang asked. Not very high, just inferior, Wang Zimin replied. Wang nodded. There's another person, named Wang Zhu, from Timing village. Wang spoke up before Wang Zimin could finish. I tested this person. His surname is Niu, right? Yes, our Congentropi county isn't entirely populated by Wang families. We also manage several villages with surnames other than ours. Even villages with the surname Niu are considered subordinate to the Congentropi county government, Wang Zimin said. Since my mother is a member of our Wang family, she should be considered a member of the Wang family. After all, mid-grade spiritual roots are rare. Wang expressed his thoughts. After testing the child last time, Wang had given it some thought and decided to take him in. Clan leader, it's not a question of whether to take him in or not, but that there are actually cultivators in this Ni village, Wang Zimin said. Oh. Wang let out a long sigh. The situation seemed to be getting a little complicated. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.